Morena koutou katoa, ko whai mai tēnei rā, ngā mihi nui kia koutou. Nau mai haere mai ki te kaunihera o Rotorua. Welcome to our Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting this morning, the 8th of April. I'd like to remind everyone that the meeting is being live streamed and welcome those who are watching online. Just a reminder to please have your mobile phones turned off or on silent, and we will be taking a break, hopefully around 11 a.m. for morning tea and 1 p.m. for lunch later on. I'd like to open.
Kia ora koutou katoa. He karakia mo te kaunihera o ngā roto o Rotorua. E te atua kaharawa ko koe te tohu rangatira, te tohu mātauranga. Manaki tia mai mātau o punanga I tēnei wā, e mahi nei I a mātau mahi mo te painga o ngā tāngata o te kaunihera o ngā roto o Rotorua. Tukua mai kia tau te rangi Mārie ki runga I a mātu I ngā wākatoa. Ko I karaiti hoki ta mātauriki. Amen. Almighty God, who alone is the leader of all mankind and the fountain of all knowledge. Send thy blessing upon us, your servants, this day, as we strive to do all things good for the betterment of the people of the Rotorua district. May we be tolerant in ourselves at all times. Through Jesus Christ our Lord. Amen. Kia ora koutou.
Kia ora, Councillor Maxwell. I now call for apologies. I do have one from Councillor Meripika Tate. Were there any others? Yes, Councillor McPherson. Thank you. There appear to be no others. May I have a mover and a seconder? Moved Councillor Yates, seconded Councillor Jonathan. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. Are there any declarations of interest this morning? There appear to be none. Any urgent items for the agenda? Yes, Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Good morning, Kia ora koutou. Thank you, Madam Chair. I don't know the urgency of this, but there's a couple of things. One, regarding the hotel motel short-term accommodation. A couple of months ago, I asked whether the resourcing consent around them were for those purposes, and it was being looked at. I'm just wondering if there's a report available, or would there be one available later?
We could take that instead of an urgent item. I'll look over at the staff and we'll get some feedback for you on that. But we do also have a rather detailed housing update in our confidential section, so feel free to ask the question then as well. Thank you. Were there any other urgent items this morning? Yes, Mr. Waru.
Not so much an urgent item, just an apology. Came back from Oahu and didn't account for that much traffic.
Classified, yeah. We're getting there. Very busy time, lots happening. I will now move to the confirmation of minutes. So we're on page 6 now of our agenda, and I ask for a mover and a seconder that the minutes of the Operations and Monitoring Committee meeting 4th of March 2021 be confirmed as true and correct record. Moved Mr. Hurd, seconded Mr. Waru. All those in favour, please say aye.
Aye.
Carried. Thank you very much. And now we move to staff reports, page 12, and we have our first recommendation in financial performance. I ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that the report financial performance for the 8 months ended 28 February 2021 be received. Moved Councillor Yates, seconded by Councillor McPherson. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. I now welcome Thomas Collet to overview his report, and I believe we'll be talking to a PowerPoint presentation this morning. Welcome, Thomas.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and good morning, councillors and board members. The financial performance for the 8 months ended February 2021. So overall, the themes that we've talked about over the last 8 months have continued. We've seen a slight improvement in our underlying operating result. So we're currently sitting about 800,000 better than budget. So within the result itself, you will note that there's some challenges in a couple of key areas and activities, and at the moment, the majority of those are being offset by better than expected performance in a couple of other areas. So a continuation of before. So those activities that are under pressure, the planning and regulatory with regards to parking revenues, but which are being partially offset by strong consenting revenues, the sewerage and sewage activity, which has been impacted by a reduction in trade waste volumes, and is also having a depreciation change, so that's a non-cash impact to the result, and community leadership, which is a reflection of the Housing and Thriving Communities strategy. So overall, as I said, combining to be about 800,000 better than budget. Just reminding you as well that within that budget, we do have a stretch target with regards to our fees and charges, and so the underlying actual budget tied to the annual plan, we are significantly ahead of the actual budget year to date, which is quite pleasing. An animation. With regards to our capital spend, that must have been Pete's little surprise for me on his last presentation that he prepared for me before he moved to Wellington. So a little animation in there for me. With regards to capital spend, $42.5 million spent year to date. You'll recall that we are forecasting to be underspent by about $40 million at the end of the year, remembering that the overall program is $120 million. Of that $40 million is tied to those big key projects that have had deferment or delays, and some of them are now well underway, but can't catch up with regards to the anticipated spend. The underlying renewal program of our infrastructure has almost now been completed, and so the majority of those are well either completed or underway, and reflecting the spend close to budget. As you'll see in the top right corner, the little graph there reflects the red line is how our budget is phased, and you'll see that big uptick in that last period. That reflects the deferred spend that we don't anticipate to happen this year. And the green line, unfortunately, is just lagging a little bit behind the blue line again, and that's just a little reflection in some of our other projects, the need to just accelerate them going forward. With regards to our debt, so very pleasing that about 3 weeks ago, on an email from Hong Kong, that Fitch Rating confirmed Council's AA- rating. So that was pleasing. That rating as well takes into account the draft long-term plan, which we're currently out consulting with our community on. So it's very pleasing to retain that rating. With regards to our debt, $216 million at the end of Feb, which was $15 million less than the start of the year. You will recall our debt was slightly elevated at the start of the year, and we were offsetting that position with about $20 million cash in hand. But still, our debt position at the moment is still a lot less than what we budgeted for and expected. We expect it to increase slightly for the remainder of the year. But as you'll see, that light blue line at the end, where we'd budgeted to the end of the year at $276 million, it's extremely likely that we'll end the year well below that, and that's a reflection, obviously, of the anticipated capital spend with regards to the $40 million less spend. That will be reflected in our end-of-year debt position. So overall, the year to date, the operating result is quite pleasing, but as I've said before, there are some challenges in there that we need to stay on top of. Our CapEx is broadly in line, and in particular, our renewal spend is on track, and our debt is in a good position as well. Where we anticipate to be at the end of the year is an operating result close to budget. I think it's safe to say that with our current result and some of our activities that are under budgetary pressure being offset by some activities that are under budget, some of those activities will likely not be able to end the year holding that favourable position to be able to offset. And so we do expect that operating result to squeeze closer to being more on budget at the end of the year. Our capital spend, as I said before, likely to be $40+ million underspent, a reflection of in particular those big key projects, and our debt position will also reflect that. With regards to the national economics, unfortunately, Rotorua Economic Development aren't in front of me, and they did a much better job last time of talking about what's happening in the market. Some of the things that are happening, vaccines are well underway. We've all seen now the travel bubble that's being announced. I think there's an expectation by mid-2021, which unfortunately is only a couple of months away, that about 40% of New Zealanders will be vaccinated. It'll be interesting to see how that actually comes about. I think the headline thing that came about was probably that New Zealand's GDP as a whole declined by 2.9% in 2020. So that's actually quite significant. And most economists think that it'll take probably 10 years for New Zealand to actually recover from the effects of that and to be back to the position that we were pre-COVID. So it'll be interesting to see how that manifests over the coming decade. The travel bubble's now been announced, so that's probably in the shovel ready. What we are seeing is the government is actually getting very strict with regards to when it awarded those shovel-ready projects, with regards to actually making sure that they're accelerated and underway. And those that actually aren't in a position to start, I think they're actually working towards pulling back that funding and obviously using those funds for other projects to support New Zealand during this time. With regards to housing, it was some interesting stats that came out of the Reserve Bank of New Zealand. And the top two graphs, I appreciate the scale's different. I've had to kind of play with them for context. On the left is the annual growth in first home borrowing. So that reflects the annual percentage of new borrowers in the market since August 2016. And on the right is the equivalent with regards to new lending for investors over that same period of time. And you'll see early 16 through to August 2020, there was kind of a decline in percentage of the overall new people investing into residential property versus the left with regards to a fairly stable volume of new home buyers entering the market. What you can see though is in that August kind of 20, that last portion, a real squeeze of first home buyers out of the market, and obviously being reflected by a significant increase in first time borrowers for investment. And so that probably comes as no surprise with regards to what we're seeing in our housing market. And it's just interesting to see how obviously the numbers support that. The bottom graph though is slightly different, and that shows all new mortgage commitments with a high LVR. So obviously those people that are leveraged very hard. And the interesting thing there is that there's a significant drop-off in investors, probably since November 2020, which is that grey line. So we'll see May 2020, post-COVID, everyone was feeling buoyant, and all of a sudden this massive investment, particularly highly leveraged investment from investors into the housing market, and that really dropped off pre-Christmas and is almost returning back to now normal levels. So does that reflect therefore that housing prices may stabilise going forward? Probably not, but it may indicate that there was a significant push obviously in those 6-7 months pre-Christmas with regards to highly leveraged borrowing into the investor sector, and note that while that's already dropping off, it'll be now interesting to see how much more of a drop-off that will occur with regards to now the tax changes that the government has announced. And so with that, just happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Thomas. Councillor McPherson.
Yes, thank you. Thank you. Through you, Chair. Thank you for your report. I think your analysis is spot on, and the only component of your report that slightly troubled me was on page 12 when we were looking at the operating expenses. The expenditure has run ahead by 2.3 million, and as I understand it, that is mostly to do with the job creation work done through Infracore. I think there's an MBIE grant involved. Over $700,000 spent on planning consultants, and over $300,000 spent on security costs. If you want to speak to any of those three items and any steps that have been taken now to cut back on the operating expenditure. Thank you.
I'd just like to remind Council that the operating cost pressures that we've talked about are a reflection of the challenges that are ahead of us at the moment. Many of those that you've highlighted are actually offset by additional revenues, which are obviously reflected by the fact that on the slide I'm showing is that our revenues are also 3.2 million better than budget, and so they are in the main being offset probably with the exception of the additional expenditure that we're incurring to just support the Housing and Thriving Communities project, and also the additional expenditure which was actually a increase in level of service around inner city safety and security at the time pre-Christmas. So other than those two, the majority of the other costs are being actually offset by the strong performance elsewhere or additional revenues.
Thank you. Your Worship, the Mayor.
Yes, just two things. That's very pleasing, particularly the Fitch rating. Congratulations. It's a great sign of confidence, really, in the financial management of the organisation. And my question was that, as housing's one of our pressure in the Housing Acceleration Fund, are we ready to apply for some infrastructure support for our housing initiatives?
I understand there's a confidential briefing on housing at the end of this meeting. I'll leave it to my colleague, Your Worship, to answer that. I'm not
okay. I'll wait till then. And the other one is great feedback on the lakefront development and the excitement that people are starting to see the project delivery in that first stage of Memorial Drive. And fantastic that's been completed prior to Anzac Day. That means a lot to those that commemorate Anzac Day, that they'll be marching from there. But well done, and we're getting great feedback to see these projects that we said we'd invest in are getting delivered.
Yes, Mr. Waru.
Tēnā koe, mōrena tātou. Kia ora, Thomas. Tēnā koe tō reporter, thank you. Just a sort of an overall question, really. As you reported, it's actually we're in a better position than we thought we were going to be. At this stage, still a bit of a significant deficit there, but you mentioned about being on budget by the end of the financial year. How confident are you of that happening?
I'm fairly confident. I mean, we are, from an operating result, currently 800,000 better than budget. And I also know that within the budgets that I'm actually showing you here, that there's actually about a $1.6 million stretch target in our revenues. So we're actually tracking probably $1 million better than what's being shown there. What I don't know, obviously, is the pressures that may come about in the next couple of months and some uncertainty. But I think overall I'm confident with regards to the organisation without any surprises that we'll be able to end the year on budget or slightly better than budget. But time will tell.
Tēnā koe, Thomas. Pakumihi noho tēnei e te chairman. Thank you, Thomas, actually, because it's not easy to come up with this kind of result in this environment we're in at the moment. So, whanui te mihi, kia whahatu.
Thank you. And just leading on from those comments as well, I do want to highlight the significance of an AA- Fitch rating. Thomas, can you just clarify, is that better than the banks? Because what that rating shows is that this organisation is able to and has shown good financial stability and strength, and I think that's just phenomenal given the last, the financial year that we've had with COVID-19.
Yeah. A AA rating is considered a very, very strong rating, and from memory, AA- was what the four major banks had. I'm not sure what they may have changed to. They definitely didn't go up. But from memory, they may have slightly gone down to A+. So that's a notch down from us.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just picking up on your observation, Thomas, the significance of the Fitch rating in terms of the significant investment we're making and the debt that we're taking on to progress these major projects. So can you just comment on what the advantages of a strong credit rating in terms of cost of borrowing?
Yep, certainly. The credit rating historically has provided substantial interest rate savings. So you recall, well maybe not, but at the time that we got the credit rating, I think 4 or 5 years ago, we ended up reducing our borrowing costs by about $500,000 per annum at that time. So by retaining the rating that we have, we do have access to cheaper cost of borrowing than if we didn't have that credit rating. But also for yourselves, I think the benefit of having an organisation like Fitch Rating, which is a global rating agency that does look at our financial performance and how we're managing our finances, also looks at our long-term planning, how we're adhering to that, what we're looking to achieve, and then the wider macroeconomics of the district, and then compares that against a lot of other entities like us throughout the world, and gives it obviously a good comparison and basis and support with regards to that independent set of eyes, just double, triple checking what we're doing.
Thank you, Thomas. There appear to be no further questions. Awesome. We'll move to our operational report for January 2021. I'll ask the mover and a seconder that the operational report for January 2021 be received. Moved Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Mr. Rothwell. All those in favour, please say aye. Carried. Thank you. I'd now like to invite our group managers up to overview the group reports. So, welcome back, Thomas. So we're on page 16 now with our business support group manager. We could probably take the report largely as read, but if there's anything you want to highlight, Thomas.
I'm happy to answer any questions.
Yes, Your Worship.
Just got a question about the completion of this building. Again, it's looking absolutely beautiful. Very proud of it. I'm very proud of it being our place here, and seeing the public coming through. When is it finished, Thomas?
So there's only a couple of other minor little aspects to be complete. So it's pretty much 97% complete now, other than some back-end stuff like the replacement of the air conditioning and cooling towers, which will take place out of sight. So overall, left to do is the public toilets with regards to the atrium, when we're targeting next financial year to tidy that up. And the cafe upstairs with regards to what the future of that going forward and what does it look like. Other than that, the renewal of this building has pretty much been completed.
Thank you.
Thank you, Thomas. I'd now like to invite our infrastructure group manager, Stavros Michael, to present his report, and we do have Waka Kotahi, who I'm sure Stavros will invite up when they're ready. And we are now on page 17.
To our reports soon, but I've got two presentations to start with. And first of all, I want to welcome our partners from NZTA, who will make their first presentation. Before they start doing the presentation, if I may just remind us that we are in the process at the moment of preparing ourselves for the future and future growth. Within your long-term plan, you have recently agreed for consultation to an infrastructure strategy that contains somewhere in the region of $100 million to upgrade our sewage systems, about $100 million to upgrade our stormwater systems for housing, and significant amounts of money for various other supplementary and complementary infrastructure components. We don't do everything ourselves, and of course we've got partners for which we rely to help us achieve our future growth capability. NZTA is a significant component of that in a partnership agreement on two levels. First of all, they fund at least half of our roading expenditure for the future, but also they're in control of key state highways in surrounding our districts. And our state highways have two significant contributions to our future. One is to enable efficient and effective corridors for commercial and freight activity. And the second one is to enable capacity for future housing capacity. And also to help us achieve mode shift improvements in the district for climate action, as a climate action plan that you have already agreed to that. So NZTA is a significant partner. I'm pleased to welcome here some our partners here, and I know you as elected members are regularly receiving some some inquiries and concerns from the public about the activities taking place on the state highway corridor, so that my partners here, our partners, will be able to talk in more detail about that. But I would like to introduce to my right is Malcolm. He's in charge of the Eastern Project Corridor. Adrian. Adrian is the overall coordinator. She's the orchestra conductor for NZTA. And Steve Cox, he's looking after the Western Corridor, the Nongodaha roundabout and his works area. So I'll let them introduce themselves and proceed with the presentation, but we have to take some questions. Just remind ourselves that NZTA currently investing somewhere in the region of $100 million in our district, and these are all investments that are consistent with our capacity, capability, and climate action plan objectives we have. Thank you.
So thank you, Stavros, and thank you for the opportunity to present to you today. As Stavros mentioned, we've got a significant amount of investment planned and underway for Rotorua. So it's fantastic. It's good to see. I actually grew up here. I live in Wellington now, but every time I come back for work and to see my family, I get amped. I'm like, look at all this happening. It's great to see. Right, we've got a little, don't we? So today we're going to cover off the projects that we've got underway currently, under construction currently, as well as some of the projects that we've got in the pipeline to deliver in the next few years. So those include the State Highway 30 Eastern Corridor Stages 1 and 2, the State Highway 30A Central Corridor, State Highway 5 Tarakinga to Nongataha, as well as in here we've also got a couple of other things. We've got State Highway 33 Tenai Junction to Paengaroa, and we've got the Speed Management Review and the Mode Shift Plan underway. So yeah, lots happening. Before we get into these specific projects, I've just got a slide up here at the moment that shows the Rotorua, and it's a really good image just to emphasise what Stavros had mentioned, the importance of the state highway network for Rotorua. Basically, we've got 3 entry points into the city. We've got State Highway 5 and 30, which feeds through from the south and wrap around the eastern and western sides of the lake, and they pretty much provide the the transport spine for the city, and then all the local roads come off it. Essentially, with all of the investment that we're doing at the moment and we're planning for is to ensure that the state highway network can respond to the growth that Rotorua is expecting, that it can keep moving people efficiently within the city and people who want to move or freight who needs to move through the city, and providing those modal choice options, so significant investment in walking and cycling infrastructure as well. So heaps going on. We'll kick into it. If we could save questions to the end, that would be helpful. Thank you. First off, we've got Malcolm.
Yeah, kia ora, everybody. Thanks for having us here today. It's good to give you a bit of an update on what we're doing. So I'm the PM on the stage 1, which is from Sala Street up to Isles Road. And I know that's been hugely disruptive, but and at times the traffic has been quite bad, but we've been trying our hardest, and we do respond to issues quickly as we can. So I'll just give a bit of an update. So we're upgrading the corridor to improve safety, access and journey route reliability, and also, as Adrian mentioned, providing better walking and cycling facilities. Construction is currently on track for completion by November 2021, which is pretty good work considering the COVID disruptions. Level 4 we had to stop work completely, and level 3 we had to operate at reduced capacity, so well done to the team actually in doing that. And we also had some design issues that we had to address along the way in terms of the raised median just past Sala Street and up to the roundabout, or just past the roundabout. December 2020, before Christmas, we completed the upgrade of Sala Street, and that it's looking really nice actually, and it's been well trafficked and holding up quite well, as you would expect with a new seal. And I must admit we've had significant reduction in traffic queues or delays since we completed the Sala Street work. That was hugely disruptive. And the Tarawera intersection, which we're currently working on, we're on second roundabout shift, and we've got one more roundabout shift left, and The point of the roundabout shifts is we move it so that the team can work on the underground or the horizontal infrastructure such as stormwater and also utilities. And in terms of that, it's been hugely interesting to find that all the utilities aren't where they're supposed to be, or they're not at the correct depth that they should be. So we've had to do a lot of discovery work and moving stuff all over the place, and also a few stormwater drains to nowhere that we've uncovered during our work. So the intersection is on schedule to be signalised by I think it's next month actually, mid-2021. And there's one more temporary roundabout shift to occur before then, which is going to happen next week. And construction of the fourth lane between Allen Mills and Isles Road is ongoing. It is on schedule to be completed, I think Corey said, next week. And improvements to the Puringa Bridge are ongoing. We've got some work going on underneath there in terms of the power cable that feeds into the city, and joining that up with the G Road cable that comes through and meets it around by Gold there somewhere. And we're also making the underpass safer for pedestrians and cyclists and easy to use. So you can bike through there without donging your head on the top of the bridge. So I think making good improvements there. And that's it. And so we've had a lot of interaction and feedback from stakeholders, and as far as we possibly can, we've taken on board that feedback. And a good example of that is the change in design on the raised medium. We've retained the flush medium for now at least. Largely positive feedback from the community, especially with the shared paths. They're looking really good in front of the redwoods there. And on the I suppose the lake side of the road there, the path isn't quite contiguous yet because we've got issues relocating or removing the power poles that are there. So we're working closely with Chorus and with their comms, and also Unison with their power moves. So that's been a bit tricky. So we're investigating how we can make our signalised intersections more user-friendly for users, including those in wheelchairs. So we're doing some work there, and we're trialling something down by the BP, or Isles Road crossing there for our paired users. And one challenge the team is facing is speeding through the work sites, both for traffic. We've had a couple of small nose to tails, but also for the workers. And that's a national issue we've got with people speeding through work sites and not really being aware of the impact that they potentially have on the workers and safety. And as part of that, we've got safety campaigns planned for the project this year to encourage and remind drivers to slow down. So that's ongoing. And we've always got the safety of our stakeholders and our workers at the core of our work. So thank you very much.
Oh, we could do questions throughout if you wanted to.
Have any field questions?
Yep.
Thank you. Just the split. The school children crossing the road was and the elderly crossing the road was always a big concern for us. And e-charges for wheelchairs. Does Waka Kotahi look at that, or is that a role for individuals to set up?
What's that, for the e-charges?
Yeah.
I don't know about that. Do you know about e-charges?
I've never heard of e-charges for wheelchairs.
No.
Sorry?
So we're asked by older people in our community, because some are moving to electronic chairs and can't make the distance if they want to come into town.
Right.
So need to charge. So if that could it's a small but very important step. And the other was the crossing, the safety of crossing for children. It still feels a bit haphazard. I remember Stavros presenting where there was going to be a sort of median where they could stop and then get over the other half of the four-laning. I don't know where that's going to happen.
Yeah, because we're not actually installing any additional sort of pedestrian refuges that I'm aware of.
But we've got retirement villages along there, and I'm worried about them getting across.
Yeah. You're talking about the section of the road from Isles Road east.
Yeah.
Well, that's stage 2. Yeah.
And that planning will be...
Yeah.
Okay, cool.
Yeah, that's true.
Thank you.
I'll move on to the stage.
Sorry, there was just a couple other questions, but only on this, please, councillors. Councillor Jonathan and then Councillor
Thank you, Madam Chair. And it's just on the eastern corridor upgrades. Some two questions, Malcolm. The first one was the traffic management, and I totally concur with the concerns to worker safety about the speeds through those sites. But does the traffic management get amended so that when there are no workers on site, the speed limit can be raised slightly? Because crawling through there at 30 k's when there is absolutely no work going on, it seems to be frustrating and abused. People just don't observe it. So that's my first one. And the same sort of thing applies further east past Orchiddy Falls when there's no one on site and the traffic management is still there. No one, hardly anyone, is observing it. So that's just my first question.
Yeah, well, that's actually a national issue, and you're quite right. It doesn't change currently. So I think that's something you need to elevate at the high level and have a discussion with an NZTA, because you're right, people just tend to ignore it when there's no one around, and that behaviour can continue into the day when we are actually working there. So, no, currently.
Yeah, no, I get that. It's that cry wolf syndrome to a degree. My other one, and I'm not sure whether it's you or Stavros, but you did raise the issue of the utilities, that significant utility disruption that you've had to deal with as part of that intersection upgrade, and we've had a significant failure at a pump station with rubble and silt just down the road in Hona Road. Are the two connected? I'm interested to know exactly where the failure is that's silted up that pump station. So Stavros may have that answer.
Yeah, fair enough. Thank you.
Thank you. Stavros will cover that later in his report. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and apologies for lateness. And I concur with Dave as Donaldson's first comment with regard to speed limits when the worksite is unattended. But my question is, in your opinion, with another proposed 1,500 sections coming out to the Wharenui block, do you think the upgraded Tinai Road will cater adequately for that in the future?
If I could respond, that's part of the Stage 2 project, and a key driver behind the design of the Stage 2 project is to cater to that development.
As a follow-up then, in your opinion, with another 3,000 odd vehicles using Tinai Road today, is it going to handle it adequately?
Thank you, Councillor Bedley. Can I remind elected members and everyone who's watching that Tinai Road at this point in time, State Highway 30, from Sala Street to Tarawera carries 45,000 vehicles a day. From Tarawera to Isles Road drops to about 25,000 because the other traffic goes up towards Tarawera. From Isles Road to Ofata drops down to about 15,000. From Ofata all the way to the airport drops down to about 10,000 to 12,000 vehicles a day. The business case design for Stage 1 and Stage 2 has taken the 45,000 to 50,000 vehicles target a day as our maximum capacity projection for the future, which takes into consideration the development of 45,000 new lots. As a standard practice for doing traffic modelling assessment for traffic in that area is that for every house generated is an assumption of between 6 and 8 vehicle trips a day. And when you put all these numbers together, you'll find out the intersection improvements, the four laning, and the traffic light signalization that is going to take place is geared to monitor and manage the traffic corridor to have a capacity of up to 50,000 vehicles a day, which in short, the answer is yes. If the corridor does not address all the traffic demand in the next 10 to 15 years, then obviously we have failed and they will need a new bypass. Thank you.
There you go.
That's more.
We'll let you carry on with your presentation. If councillors or elected members do have any questions, please write it down and we'll cover it off at the end. Back to you, Adrian.
Thank you, Malcolm. So the Stage 2 project that we've got underway is from Isles Road through to the airport. So that's the Stage 2 project. The key focus of this project is to address the safety and connectivity issues on the corridor and to accommodate for that future growth that we're going to see in the east side, as well as providing better travel choice, and it responds to the question around ability for people to move across the state highway. That's one of the things that we're quite conscious of, is that it can sever the community, and it currently does. So what we're proposing will provide much better options for people to cross the state highway at points along the corridor, and we've been quite strategic in our placement of pedestrian signals at locations where people would like to cross the road. So we completed community engagement on the Stage 2 business case at the end of last year, and got really good feedback from the community. And we actually got really good engagement from the community on the CBC's detailed business case as well. So we had about 100 individual submissions or responses from the community, as well as about 700 individual sightings on our project engagement website, which is really, really good to see and shows the level of engagement that the community has in what we're doing. So I took that as a win, personally. The feedback showed really strong support for the walking and cycling infrastructure, safety improvements, and really strong support for the need for predictable travel times and for access off the side roads onto the state highway to better integrate with the local roads. So we completed the business case at the end of last year, and that was presented to our board delegations committee, who approved it or endorsed it. So that's now closed off, and we've got the funding for the first phase of the works committed, but the total funding for the full detailed business case is $80 million, which is now in Waka Kotahi's, future schedule, although the later phases aren't funding committed. The fact that the business case is endorsed shows that the commitment that this work does need to be delivered down the track. So on the board here we've got the extent of the Stage 2 business case improvements. So like I said, it's from Isles Road right through to the airport, and basically it includes a number of intersection improvements. So we'll be signalising the intersections at Bazley, Orwhata, Whananui, Robinson and G and Lee Road. In addition to this, we will be installing on-road cycle lanes on both sides of the roads right through the extent of the project area, as well as a shared path which crosses over the corridor at certain points, like I mentioned, at key points where people would like to cross the road. So it's providing access to the shopping complexes, Puketawhero Park, then back over to the school zone side, and then across again out to the airport. At those points where the shared path does cross over, will be signalised pedestrian crossings as well for people to make those movements safely. In addition to the signals and the shared path and cycle lanes, we've got 4 laning from Isles Road through to just past Robinson Ave. In the longer term, this is the full business case, and that will be delivered in phases. And then we're also removing the slip lanes that are all along the corridor currently, realigning G Road to align with Lee Road. So we've only got one intersection at that point, one access onto the state highway, and then the roundabout at the airport, so that we've got one entrance into the Eastgate Business Park and airport. So, like I said, this is the full extent of the business case. The business case has been broken into 3 phases of work, and the phases are all about delivering what is needed currently to address the current concerns, current needs for the network, and then later phases 2 and 3, will be delivered as growth occurs, as the development in the Whananui Hills is delivered, and the development at the airport, the Eastgate Business Park development continues. That will drive the later phases of work to be delivered. So in terms of phase 1, I'll go into this slide, but I might flick back again. So phase 1, we've got the funding committed through the Crown Infrastructure Partners COVID Response and Recovery Fund. So that's $35 million that we've got as part of a joint package with Council. Council received, thank you, $20 million to improve stormwater and local road infrastructure. We've received $35 million to improve the state highway infrastructure. So fantastic opportunity to get in and deliver this now, essentially. Phase 1 is all about supporting growth and the development in the Whanganui Hills, and like I said, this is responding to the current needs on the corridor. And then phases 2 and 3 will be delivered as that development occurs. So if I just go back to the previous slide, what will be delivered as part of phase 1, which is with the funding committed element of the project, is the phase 1 project extent goes from Isles Road through to about Rotara Road, and will include the signalised intersections at Dagley, Orwhata and Whanganui Roads. It will include the shared path and cycle lanes from the Isles Road through to Rotara Road, and it will include the 4-laning between Isles and Dagley and Brent and Orwhata. So essentially the 4-laning between those sections is in response to the fact that we're designing the signalised intersections to cater for 4 lanes in the long term. Under the current traffic volumes, what Stavros mentioned earlier, and the current need for the corridor, we don't need 4-laning right the way through that corridor currently, but we're future-proofing for that to be delivered. And so those sections where we are 4-laning, it doesn't make sense for us to go from 4 lanes at intersections down to 2 lanes and then back up to 4 lanes. Yeah, so we're delivering that as part of the phase 1 works. And so essentially from Isles to Rotara, the works beyond that for phases 2, like I said, development driven, and they include the extending of the 4-laning, the additional intersection improvements and the roundabout at the Eastgate airport location there. So we're aiming to start construction on the minor elements of the project, so that includes where the shared path crosses over local roads. We'll be putting in raised platforms to make that transition over the local road a bit smoother, particularly for people in wheelchairs and bikes and things. So we're aiming to start that in August this year, and then the major work constructions we won't be starting until the stage 1 works is complete, just to reduce the impact on the community. That, I think, is at stage 2, correct? We'll move on to State Highway 30A.
Okay, back to me again, right? Right, 30A, Amahau Street, Old Taupo Road to Farmer Street. So this project supports the Council's revitalisation of the city centre, and includes revocation of the road once works are complete, so essentially handing the road to the Council for ongoing maintenance. We're upgrading State Highway 30A, Amahau Street, with a focus on improving safety and walking. So you'll notice there's a common theme here. We're all about cycling and walking, and as a priority. The detailed design is now complete, and the project is in preempt and currently seeking funding and timing for construction. And the total budget's been confirmed for the improvements at around approximately $22 million. We're talking about the start date for construction currently, but it's currently scheduled for May 2022. And we're aware that we've got work at Nongataha, got the current stage 1 project ongoing, and also planning stage 2. So we don't want to have all those corridors chopped up all in one go. So we're going to have a meeting on Monday to talk about priorities and timing, so that we reduce the impact on the network. And as I mentioned, we'll wait until construction of the Eastern Corridor is completed, which will be November, December, although the main tranche of physical works will be completed September, October, and then it's really just tidying up and doing beautification type works. And again, we don't want to place too much pressure on the network. And one of the key priorities of this project is to reduce the conflict between vehicles, pedestrians and cyclists. So cycle lanes, shared paths, to help with that. And next. And here's a bit of a summary of the proposed changes or enhancements, construction works. It's quite hard to read. Removing the slip lane, I'll give you a bit of an overview. Removing the slip lane or existing slip lane at State Highway 530A and building a new lane to be controlled by a giveaway. New staggered crossing outside Rotorua Boys High School. Very similar to stage 2, we're going to have raised crossings at various points on the corridor. Removing right turn movement from Pukuatua Street intersection. And apparently this intersection has higher crash rate due to right turn movements. And installing dedicated cycle crossings at some intersections. New signalised raised crossing at Tutanikai Street. And we're removing the current slip lane at Nimari Street and building a new lane controlled by a giveaway and to help slow down speeds and remove conflict with crossing and shared paths that is going to be constructed. We're also lengthening the slip lanes near Margarita Street and also building a raised crossing and installing a new priority crossing point between bus stops prior to Sala Street. And we're also widening the footpath and building new shared paths along parts of the corridor, as well as installing a solid median through the first section outside Boys High School. And also installing or building on-road cycle lanes and building a new dual direction cycle lane in front of Central Mall there. And in general, we received good comments from the public or feedback from the government about the removal of slip lanes, and they've both been removed for safety reasons. And slip lanes encourage higher speeds and create conflicts with students near the high school and cyclists and pedestrians. So you're prioritising the safety of cyclists, pedestrians, but you know, also trying to keep traffic moving. And that's about it. Yeah.
Cool. We'll move on to the State Highway 5 monitor.
Kia ora, Steve Cox, Project Manager, Waka Kotahi. I think everybody be aware that we've started works on the intersection, and we're into the groove of it now. We're starting to make some good progress. I'd just like to take time to remind council and people that the way that this project was born. Basically, it was the morphing of two separate projects. There was a low-cost, low-risk project that was anticipated to start back in 2018, which was to do something. And then there was also the safety improvements, which are from the intersection itself, the 8 kilometres or so up towards, just past the Marai and Rotara sites. The project was born through the benefit of COVID arriving, I guess, as a provincial growth funded project, and basically it was deemed to be shovel ready, and where we could get the works on site urgently, and there was funding allocated, and the project, we started back in February of last year, and it's been quite a journey. It's been quite a fast journey, and we've had to modify the design slightly, and obviously get into a position where we get into construction so that we can complete the works by December of this year, and that's a date that's been mandated by the approval to proceed. We've got there with a lot of help from Stavros and the team, helping with communicating with the community. Obviously, we knew it was going to cause a lot of disruption when we start a major intersection. And obviously, we're trying to be mindful of the other works that are going on in Rotorua in itself. So we've got on site, we've started, we've had a lot of observation that traffic is slow and disrupted, and we have the team trying to identify ways that we can improve it, even if it's only slightly. The phase that we're in at the moment, we're reconstructing the slip lane, which is the slip lane which would lead to Tirau or Hamilton. Once we've got that constructed, we will then move the traffic to build the main body of the roundabout, and that will hopefully commence later this month, mid to late. And then we'll move the congestion issues, or the focus will be then how we manage the traffic in and out of around of Nongataha village in itself. With Stavros' team, we've been observing the traffic currently, just to see maximise or minimise the disruption that we can cause, and come up with hopefully some cool techniques of how we keep the traffic flowing, which is the most important thing. So that should become visible, like I say, late April, in which time we will then start continuing the works up towards Western Road and beyond, towards where the existing roadworks have been progressing since late last year rather. Hopefully they're finished this month, so that we can then start putting all the safety improvements on that bit of carriageway, working back towards the roundabout in itself. Then, following completion of the roundabout works, we'll then continue the stage. There's 2 kilometres or so of safety improvement works that will go west towards T-Row, and that will commence, we're thinking sort of July, August, but that will be minor in terms of disruption to traffic. It will be shorter widening and some minor pavement repairs. The other points to raise, we've been working closely with Council with regards to trying to improve the cyclist facilities around the roundabout. Obviously there's a preferred route that we're aware of, which is the old rail trail cycle route, which is where we'd like to keep the majority of the cyclists. Keep them away from road traffic is always good, but we do accept that people will want to use the intersection from a commuter possibly perspective. So we are looking at ways where we can keep them safer or improve it, even if it is only slight. In terms of timing, we hope to have the intersection complete by July 21. We will then, hopefully the project in its entirety will be complete by December 21, so we're on track. Relatively comfortable where we are at the moment. Obviously, disruption is the main topic, I guess. So, other than that, yeah.
Cool. Thanks, Steve. So, under speed management, so we've been doing a lot of speed management reviews across the country. Waka Kotahi has been looking at across the country what the safe and appropriate speeds are through urban areas and on our open highways. So we've completed a couple of speed reviews last year. So you would have seen the speed management, the speed changes on State Highway 30 and 33 at Rotorua change in June last year, as well as the State Highway 5 Waiotapu changed in June last year. We have now moved on to State Highway 5 and State Highway 30. We've coordinated the community engagement on these speed reviews with Council and some local road speed changes to coordinate the communication with the community and get feedback together on that, and it means they don't have to go out another time separately to engage. Reduces the consultation fatigue that could come through on these things. So that consultation is currently underway and will close on the 21st of April. From there, we will take that feedback from the community on board. We'll have another look at what our technical assessments suggest the appropriate speed limits are, and then we'll come back. We'll pass that phase. Sorry, this is the. Hang on, I'll step back. The process for speed reviews is to do a technical assessment, to engage with the community on what they think the safe and appropriate speeds are, to take that feedback back and incorporate that into the final recommended speed, and that is what we're currently out on consultation on at the moment. So that consultation closes on the 21st of April. Following that will be the speed changes being implemented. So that's currently for State Highway 30 and 5, as well as the local road changes that have been coordinated with Council. And then for the future ones that we're yet to assess and are at that technical assessment stage is State Highway 30 and 33 and 30 and State Highway 36, State Highway 5 roundabout to Ngongataha. So those are in that technical assessment stage. State Highway 33, Tenai Junction.
Okay. This is me again. So that's a good project, though, and it's just typical Safe Networks program, or what used to be called the Safer Roads. So typically centreline widening, shoulder widening, and also wire rope at high-risk locations. So construction commenced in 2017, and we're on track for at the moment, programming in May 2022 finished there. We've had to extend the program slightly just to cater for mock reseals, because they got resealed during the summer period, which has pushed our program out to about 5 months. To mention safety improvements include wide shoulders and centreline and roadside safety barriers at high-risk locations. We've completed the Pine Raw section and southbound passing lane and Moria to State Highway 33 Centre intersection. Currently working on the final stages between Okiri Falls and southbound passing lane that opened in December 2020, or section 3B we call that one. So the Okiri Falls section includes the shared path construction between Okiri Falls and Moria Bridge. And that's actually a low-cost, low-risk project which is being constructed as part of our safety works to minimise disruption and also save a bit of money there in terms of traffic management and the like. And a design is completed for Okiri Falls, and we've had massive amount of stakeholder feedback on that one. That's been a very interesting one. But overwhelmingly, potentially about 85% support for the construction of the path in its current guise. And the design really is led by a couple of factors, one being iwi desire not to construct anything in the lake bed, and also cost. So we've had to construct part of the path along the lake front, but not in the lake bed, really because of cost, because it's far too expensive to actually start hacking away at the bank and moving away a lot of earth to construct it there. So we're constrained by geometry and money, and but I think what we're going to build is actually going to really enhance the region and be a real boon for locals. And as I say, there's been overwhelming support, up to about 85% there. So that's a really good news story, I feel.
Cool, last slide. So the final thing that we've got underway for Rotorua at the moment is the Rotorua Mode Shift Plan. So Mode Shift, as we've reinforced through every project, is a strong priority for this government, and that comes through in our government policy statement. We, Waka Kotahi, have a national mode shift strategy, and the aim of that is to increase the well-being of New Zealand cities by growing the share of travel by public transport, walking and cycling. So that feeds through to everything that we're delivering. At the moment, the Rotorua Mode Shift Plan is a subsection to the Bay of Plenty Mode Shift Plan, and we're in the final stages of pulling that together, and we'll be presenting that to Council in the coming weeks. So, yeah, like I said, it just reinforces the desires of the government and feeds through to what we're delivering on the ground now and in our future plans. And that is the end of that. Questions?
Thank you very much. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a query with regard to the many different contracts that you're operating at the moment. Do you have in those contracts a bonus to the contractor for early completion?
Not typically.
Do you think you should consider it, given the time that some of these contracts do take?
Yeah, we do drive the contractor to deliver, obviously, quality and the time, but our procurement rules don't really allow us to award bonuses for meeting early targets or anything like that. So we're really constrained by the government procurement rules, really, in terms of that.
Thank you. Mr. Hurd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'd like to preface what I'm going to say by saying that we really appreciate seeing this stuff happen, guys, because as a regular traveller into town from Hamarana, I've been coming through that Ngātaha roundabout for a long time, and it's great to see something happening. What I would like to just say quickly is a suggestion to help with the traffic congestion. I noticed that there's one consistent thing with the congestion in Ngātaha, that is that the State Highway 5 traffic queue is a lot shorter than the State Highway 36 one. State Highway 36 travellers are waiting up to 40 minutes. I've done it myself several times in Ngātaha. It's so much so that I shoot up Galbraith Road and come down State Highway 5 to head off the queue. If some measures were put in place there to assist the State Highway 36 flow, even the pedal sign guy sense of that 20 cars this way, 20 cars that way, whereas there's a lot more coming along State Highway 36, so a lot more waiting.
Thank you. We have instructed the site team to monitor from that perspective, so I'm calling the site on my way back to Hamilton. I'll take up the conversation and pass on your observation and comments. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Mr. Waru followed by Her Worship.
Tēnā koe te teo mana. I'd just like to start off to say, no mai haere mai ki Rotorua Reurua. Nice to see you here. And just this morning, actually, I was at Te Te o Ngā Taungihanga Iaua i Te Waha. And I was saying, I've got to go now, aren't you? And I've got to go to the council. Oh, you asked them about the traffic. So I'm glad you're here. And it's cleared up that it's the wakakotahi kaupapa. And I think we should maybe this council be a bit better at putting that out there. So just saying, suggestion. Bueno, kai te mihi atu kia koutou. And my question is, I've got a couple, but the only easy ones. So my main kaupapa is I'm like Mr. Hurd over here, I live out there in Ngongataha, but I also have to travel over to the east side most days for kids training at Pikiao and all that kind of stuff. So I cop it both ways. The Tarukinga development or the project, Ngongataha one and the one out the east side here, I'm not too sure. I don't know if I read wrong or I didn't hear it. What are the approximate dates for completion?
So stage one, which is from Sala Street to Isles, they're substantially complete by about September, October, and sort of all complete, all the beautification and the rest of it completed by December, before Christmas.
Right.
Yeah.
And my other question too was around the speed hui kaupapa. You mentioned you do the consultation, then you put it together, then you put recommendations forward to the wakakotahi or the powers that be. How much mana or how much weight does your recommendation have with that?
Can you explain what you mean by our weight? Is it the wakakotahi?
Yeah, well, you mentioned you gather the kōrero, you have your consultation hui, you then collate all that information and you put it together and you package it up in a recommendation to the powers that be, Kareo Mōhio.
Yeah.
But then, do they usually take that? How often do they?
Yeah, no, they usually take the recommendation. So the first step is to do a technical assessment, and that looks at the crash rate, the crash statistics on the road, and how the surrounding environment may have changed since the previous setting of the speed limit, and then that technical assessment essentially recommends what a safe and appropriate speed would be, and we use that to go out in that first, we have that knowledge, and then we go out to the community and ask the community what their views are, and we take the technical assessment as well as the community's views on what they think the safe and appropriate speed would be to feed into the final recommendation that gets put up for approval. And I mean, it's not often that it gets pushed back, yeah.
Kapai, thank you, and again, kai te mihi atu kia kōrua, kia kaha ki te whakamana i te reo Māori, kia koutou, kia ora.
Kia ora. We have Her Worship followed by Councillor Kumar, Donaldson and Max.
Well, thank you very much for coming. It's fantastic to see you, and that understanding that this is a lot of investment coming into Rohe is fantastic. The two issues for me, that the Tarukinga and the entranceway to Kauai Cemetery, we kept trying to inch that into that project as well. Massive traffic flows. Have we been successful about getting into the Urupā at Tarukinga and Kauai? And we love what you're doing out there. So that's the first one. Yep.
Okay, thank you. So the Rotara site near the Tarakanga Marae, yes, we'll be making improvements to that. We've been working closely with the Marae Trust, and we're waiting for the road builder to get out of the way now so we can complete them works, because we've got some safety barriers and the likes to install in and around that area. in terms of the cemetery in town, that still remains out of scope at the moment.
What a pity, isn't it? Do it once, do it right. But the other issue for us, and we started this kaupapa back in our Vision 2030, was about entranceways and telling our stories. So you've got a roundabout out on Tino Road, second stage, and you've got one coming into Tauranga now. Is there any consideration there for how we could mark those entranceways?
In my particular project, there's nothing planned or in scope at this moment in time.
Thank you.
And for the Stage 2 project for the entrance at the airport estate, we have had initial conversations with the Katapunamu Community Trust and about getting some artwork or something put in there. What that would be, we haven't got into detail, but we have had a conversation to initiate that.
Thank you. That's very significant to us.
Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the Chair, good morning and thank you so much for the presentation. Particularly need a little bit of enlightenment around the Stage 2, Phase 1, between Isles Road and Rotorua Airport, Stage 2, but Phase 1, regarding mainly the number of lights that I see in the distance, in a very short distance. There's almost 5, and then imposing speed limits. I don't think when you can move from one to another, you'll probably even get to 50 or 60 because of the density of it. But what my concern was with businesses, if there are so many lights and I may have missed it, are there island strips to stop them from turning right, or if they're coming from right and they want to turn into a business, if they're coming down towards the city, if they want to turn right in between that strip?
So for the Isles Road to the Stage 2, the Isles Road through to the airport, we won't be putting in a solid median for the majority of the corridor because of all of the residential property. So people need to have the ability to turn into their driveway. So there'll be a painted flush median for the bulk of the corridor. In terms of your question about the lights, appreciate that there are a number of signalised intersections going in. This is really, we tried to minimise the number that we needed, but based on the significant growth that is going to occur in the east side and in the Whanganui Hills, we need the lights to provide the people coming out of those side roads access onto the state highway. If we didn't have them, they essentially won't get onto the state highway.
Thank you. And also I can see that they are pedestrian crossings as well, which is very important for safety.
Yeah. And thank you. Just a supplementary to it, I see there are some traffic coming slow on local roads. So that means if people want to get past those lights, they can't just cut into one of those and go all the way through the back roads.
Yes, exactly. Yeah. So and that's part of the work that the Rotara team is working on. So the 20 million that they've got allocated for the stormwater and local road improvements is feeding into that. So to make sure that we don't have that rat running, what we call it, occur.
Councillor Johnson.
Madam Chair, through you, I think the importance of the revocation of 30A for the walkability of the inner city is a really critical one that we've looked forward to for quite some time. My question is, there's a raised crossing, signalised raised crossing for width at Tūtanakai Street. Is that across Tūtanakai Street or is that across the Amahau Street? And I just wonder if all of these improvements, are you confident that that will deter through traffic on the state highways from bypassing this? Or are we still going to see heavy vehicles rumbling through there? I know they're entitled to going forward, but does your modelling suggest a reduction in cross traffic through there, particularly heavy cross traffic going through there, just so that we can get that connectivity between the inner city and the central mall?
To be honest, I'm the construction PM, so I can't really answer those questions for you. But I know with truck drivers, I used to manage a log yard at KPP in Carroll back in the late 90s, and they'll always take the shortest path to get to where they want to go, especially when you're talking about ruck charges and all the rest of it. So I think you probably know the answer to that question. And we can follow up with those design questions for you later if you want to.
Can I just supplement it to, thank you, Councillor Dunsall. I think it's quite important to highlight that one of the intentions of the interventions on the Amo House streets is actually to make it a little bit less convenient for heavy traffic to go through it. At some point in time when we can achieve the revocation, once NZTA has brought the asset to the standard we expect it to be, then we can have regulatory authority of that corridor too. However, in parallel with that, we are working with NZTA to do a strategic business case from Sala on the south side, Sala all the way to Himo, which at the moment is really, we don't believe is up to the standards. And once we improve that, then we can implement regulations to compel heavy traffic to go in that direction too. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. If you could leave that slide up there, slide 7. Mine is a question about the traffic lights. Do you accept it? I'm not complaining about that one. Told my colleague I did have a question on this one. I see the benefit of that now because of Lake Road. Some years ago, we had many huis and ohinamatu that could never get out of the village onto the road. And since those lights had come in, especially 4-laning, patiently they wait and they go when the lights give them a call. Further to that, though, I could see the benefit of all the schools that are along there that can get over because of the pedestrian and that. For me too, I wanted to ask the question, it's looking after all the schools here, but there's one more school further on from the airport. How well will they be looked after? Because in a way, people are going to speed up after they get out of the traffic lights. Hopefully you can answer that one.
Look, it is something that we are conscious of, and the project extent essentially ended at the airport, and we have subsequently had conversations with Rotara School and the kohanga that is next door to it. Rotara, beyond Rotakawa is Rotara. Okay. The shared path that goes out to the airport currently is scheduled for phase 2 works. When we revisit that, we will be looking at where that should actually end and where would be a safe place to enable access for those schools. At the moment, it isn't within the current project scope, but it doesn't mean that it can't be looked at down the track.
Another point to note is that we're currently in feasibility or preempt for building a roundabout at the 30-33 intersection currently. So in terms of that, there's actually going to be a gap between the airport and that 30-33 intersection where we won't have any improvements, infrastructure improvements. So that's probably something for us to elevate and discuss going forward with our peers.
Thank you. Councillor Yates, followed by Councillor Wang, and then Her Worship.
Through you, Madam Chair, nei rā te mihi, o tira nei rā te mihi kia koutou katoa. Thank you, Uncle Trev. That was going to be my little question about, in particular, Rua Mata, because we have discussed it a few times at the table when we've had NZTA here. So, he waka kotahi. Nā reira, ka tūkuna te mihi. Really, really impressed to finally see the airport roundabout being part of this conversation that we're finally having here, as opposed to lobbying for it still. I'd also like to acknowledge, on behalf of, as a Board of Trustee member at Rotorua Boys High School, the considerations that are going to be taken into place with regards to that Pukuatua Street and that end of State Highway 30 there. A final commendation is also to the use of me mahika tika kia koe, Mr. Waru, and the use of your tohu tō in this particular document. It's not often seen that our kupu, especially here in Tarawa, are acknowledged with their correct spelling. So, nenehi. I'll leave it there. My question was asked.
Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and kia ora koutou. Thank you for the presentation. I think it's really, really exciting to see so many things going on to improve our whole city. I just had a quick few questions here, and the first one was the weather event on the 31st of April, or the day before, 31st of March. Did that have any effect on, did that have any damage on any of the projects that are ongoing or delays?
No damage, but it did push our construction schedule back a week because we had a whole lot of road sealing and concrete work we wanted to do last week before Easter, and we pretty much had to park all of that, and so we're starting it up again this week. So yeah, weather has a big impact, especially when you're getting towards the doing the finishing touches on pieces.
There was no adverse effects on the project. If anything, it was a benefit. We'd heavily stabilised the pavement, sorted out to cure that bit of infrastructure, so it was a benefit.
Kia ora, thank you. And my second question was, and I echo Mr. Hurd's comment as well, and totally tautoko his comments. As someone that has to drive through Rotara roundabout every morning, since the construction has started, it's been a bit longer, but it's it's accepted because to have a really quality roundabout, obviously throughout the construction it's going to take a little bit longer. But has there been any look into variable speed signs, like temporary variable speed signs? And I think it was Mr. Waru that was talking about the Mr. Hurd that was talking about Councillor Bentley it was, that was talking about when there's nothing happening there, that we could increase the speed limit a bit. And a variable speed sign, an electronic variable speed sign would seem to be a pretty good idea.
In terms of obviously the site's at the 30 when there's activity, I will research with the Coptum leaders who own the road book, and if we can remove the signs for a period, then like say when there's no work happening, we'll certainly look at that if it's going to improve the situation.
Thank you. It's just because I think with them being there, people do get complacent and then frustrated and don't tend to follow the limit as closely as they should. But thank you so much for presenting today.
Thank you. And we have the last question by Her Worship.
I wished it was more significant, but it is very important to the Aokere Falls community, and thanks for the consultation you've had. Stavros and I have been out with the Lakes Board Chair, and we're still hammered about why don't you just build an underpass. Can you give us an idea of the cost? You're the experts. We couldn't. Stavros tried, but it's not going away. And I heard you mention iwi concerns about interference with the lake bed, and I understand that sensitivity. But they're never going to give it up until we know that it's sort of the cost.
Yeah. We don't have a cost, but we are going to conduct a feasibility study to ascertain a cost to build on there, so we can respond to Mr. Wilkins.
Well, it's the community. We get it at every ratepayer meeting. Actually, not Mr. Wilkins leads the charge, but we have never given a good answer.
No, we haven't. That's right. Cost. Exactly right.
So thank you.
So we are conducting a feasibility study. That piece of work would be hugely disruptive, but we'll see how much it costs.
Thank you.
Well, thank you very much. I'd like to thank you, Adrian, Malcolm and Steve, for coming here and presenting today. It's of huge significance to our community, both for the positive benefits that will come, but for the current short-term challenges that it also brings. So we appreciate you coming here and answering our questions. Thank you very much. Thank you. I'd like to suggest that we take a short break for 15 minutes and we can return at 11:10, please. Thank you very much.
Think you know FOGO? Trying to work out what goes where and when? Well, let's see if we can clear up any questions. Disposal of kitchen waste is the one thing most people want to know more about. But can you really put all your kitchen food scraps in your lime green lid bin? Well, you know what? You sure can. And a few extras. Think
Welcome back, everybody. We'll get you to take your seat so we can resume shortly. Well, welcome back. We'll resume our meeting. We have Stavros still here overviewing the infrastructure group, and we have another presentation this morning.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Again, just I'll let Regan and Prashant to go over their presentations, but I think just to remind us that we do have a waste minimization strategy and plan that we have agreed in 2016, and very many different actions that plan has signaled. One is about the ongoing efforts to minimize and reduce the amount of waste that goes to a landfill. We have discussed in the LTP, which is out of consultation at the moment, the possibility of exploring the offering of a service for green and food waste organic collection. And Regan and Rashad will go through the details of that. So when the consultation takes place in the next few months, next year, you're fully aware of the details behind it. Thank you very much.
Kia ora koutou. For those who haven't yet had the pleasure of meeting our Solid Waste Cost Centre Manager, I would like to introduce Dr. Prashant Praveen. He's put together an excellent presentation for us today, and just to add to what Stavros said before, this is also identified in our recently done climate action plan. So without stealing any thunder and without further ado, Prashant.
Namaste. Kia ora koutou, and thanks, Regan. Thank you for the opportunity to make this presentation. Putrescible diversion, also known as organics diversion, and we call it the FOGO project. FOGO is F-O-G-O. F-O stands for food organics, G-O stands for green organics, and it's a good way to suggest that we are not just looking at food waste or green waste, we are looking at the whole stream of organic waste. And organic waste is actually quite important, and there are three reasons why it's being considered by everyone, not just in New Zealand, but globally. The first reason is that it's the largest component of municipal solid waste. Generally, for any city, it makes up over 50% of the total waste. The second reason is the climate risks that come out of this. So we all know about landfill methane emissions, but what we don't know is almost all of that methane comes from putrescible waste. And if you take that out, there is no methane to start with. The third reason is that although it is called waste, it's being increasingly recognized as a resource because it's very easy to convert food waste and green waste into minerals or into energy. And people who do worm farming or home composting, they know how easy it is. Now, we have, this council adopted waste minimization plan in 2015-2016, and organics diversion was a part of it. Earlier this year, council adopted Rotorua's climate action plan, and organics diversion was also part of that plan. New Zealand government has recognized food waste as a priority waste stream to be diverted from landfills, and there are new legislations or changes in the existing legislations to promote this diversion. And as you see on the slides, there are two legislations that apply to waste going to landfill. The first one is emissions trading scheme, which you can say it's a climate change tax. And the second one is Waste Minimization Act, which allows the government to impose a landfill levy. Now, emission trading scheme came into effect in 2012, but there were exemptions. But over the past few years, the cost has been going up. So if you look at the chart on the left side, in 2017, the taxes were about $14 per ton of carbon dioxide equivalent. It has gradually increased. Last year, mid-last year, the costs were about $25 per ton of carbon dioxide. And then government brought this reform and said that the minimum taxes would be $35, and it can go as high as $50. So at the beginning of April, the costs were about $37. Now these costs are for carbon dioxide. If we convert it into per ton of waste, that $35 will probably become $42 per ton of waste. Now, if you look at Rotorua's landfill charges, currently stands at $155 plus GST, and these taxes make up a large part of it. So, I think currently we are 25% of our landfill charges right now is because of central government taxes, and it's set to go higher. A few weeks back, government announced changes in landfill levy, and the landfill levy, which is currently at $10 per ton of waste, it's set to increase in steps to $60 per ton of waste by 2024. And all these changes, they are going to increase our landfill disposal cost. We are looking at close to $1 million increase in our operating costs for landfill. And we have to start looking at how do we divert more and more waste from landfill. So to plan a strategy, we started looking at the tonnage to the landfill. And if you look at the numbers, the tonnage have increased by 20% between 2018 and 2020. Now, part of the reasons for this increase has been the increasing population of Rotorua and increasing number of households. And a typical household in Rotorua produces about 550 kgs of waste every year. So if the number of households increase by 100, you're looking at about 50-ton increase in the waste going to landfill. But what we also noticed based on feedback from drivers is that more and more people are filling up their red bins with green waste. So whatever space there is, people just empty their lawnmower catcher there. And we had results from last audit, which was conducted in 2017, which showed us 22% of total waste was green, 25% was food. And then we did another audit in December last year, and that shows us that 56% of our bin is made up of green waste and food waste. And if you look at the pie chart, it was quite obvious what waste stream we should target. Other than that 56%, what we noticed was there were tissues, towels, there was paper which could be composted, pizza boxes. All of those are compostable material, and the total we are looking at close to 65% of the materials in our red bin that can be composted. And so it was quite easy for us to decide that we are going to target organic waste to maximize waste diversion from landfill. Now there are two parts of the diversion. One part is we have to think about, once we have collected, what do we do with this organic waste? And the second question was, how do we collect organic waste? Because that's going to involve source segregation and a lot of cooperation from the residents. So we first looked at the disposal part, and we considered two technologies, composting and anaerobic digestion. Now there are two different processes, and the difference is in terms of whether or not they receive oxygen. So composting is an aerobic process. What it means is that this process only occurs in the presence of oxygen. Anaerobic digestion is a similar process, but it occurs in the absence of oxygen. Theoretically, both composting and anaerobic digestion can take food and green waste. However, with green in anaerobic digestion, there are problems. Composting produces soil which is quite rich in nutrient. Anaerobic digestion produces biogas, which is a mixture of methane and carbon dioxide. It has got very high calorific value, so it can be used to produce heat or electricity. And a byproduct of anaerobic digestion is digestate. which is a slurry quite rich in nutrients, carbon, nitrogen and phosphorus and other minerals, and can be used as a fertilizer. Now, there's a debate going on in New Zealand which of these processes is better. The fact is both of them are excellent. Both of them do the job, and both can work quite well with food waste especially. In terms of composting, we currently don't have local infrastructure, but we have got Rotorua waste to energy plant under construction right now, and once it is completed, it can be used for food waste diversion. The major difference between the two is in terms of cost. Composting is going to cost us around $50 to $60 per ton of waste, but anaerobic digestion, it requires a lot of engineering to keep oxygen out of the reactor, and so it's quite expensive to operate, and we expect it to be more expensive than the landfill charges, to be close to $200 a ton, and there lies a major limitation for anaerobic digestion. But for our options analysis, we considered both, and I'll show you the results later. So in composting, there are two ways to do it. One is open windrow composting, where it's just about organizing green waste in neat rows, turning it. It can be done outside, can be done under open environment, and it tends to be quite cheap because there's very little control involved. On the downside, it takes a long time to give us a product, requires large land area, smell may be an issue. So there is another process that's called in-vessel composting, and as it sounds literally, it's composting within a vessel where you can control the temperature, you can control the airflow rate, you can control the humidity, and just because everything is controlled, you can compost within a month. And it's ideal for food waste because you don't get any smell, you don't get pests, you don't get rodents, in terms of legislation, you don't get complaints from neighbors. It's got very small footprint, but all these advantages come at the higher capex and opex cost. Generally, operating the in-vessel composting systems are 30 to 40% higher. In terms of collection options, we considered 4 options. There was GO, which was only green waste. There was FO, only food waste. There was separate collection of food waste and green waste, which is a combination of option 1 and option 2. And then there was a 4th option where we collect mixed food and green, and that's called FOGO. And the first option of green waste is quite straightforward. We give a bin, fortnightly collection, people know what to do, very little problems expected. Under best case scenario, we will divert about 25% of the waste. Second option is food waste, which again can divert a maximum of 25% waste, and there'll be compliance concerns. Separate collection of food and green is another good option. However, it will involve 2 separate collections, 2 different truck runs, and it's expected to be very expensive. But it can divert 50% of the rubbish under best case scenario. And then there's a 4th option, FOGO, where we use 1 bin and 1 truck run to collect both food and green. And this will cut our costs significantly, and at the same time, it will give us best case scenario 50% diversion. And when we compare these, FOGO turned out to be the best option. And just show you what FOGO has been implemented by several councils in Australia, especially smaller councils, to cut the collection cost. In New Zealand, Christchurch Council operates something like a FOGO, where both food and green, they are collected together, and they compost over 45,000 tons of organic material every year. So I've got a video from Melville Council in Australia which shows what FOGO is about.
Think you know FOGO? Trying to work out what goes where and when? Let's see if we can clear up any questions. Disposal of kitchen waste is the one thing most people want to know more about. But can you really put all your kitchen food scraps in your lime green lid bin? Well, you know what? You sure can. And a few extras as well. Think about it as a giant compost bin. And even better than a home compost bin, you can also put in all your citrus, meat and bones, seafood and dairy products, even your grains, tea and coffee grounds. You throw used napkins and tissues into this bin as well. They all go into the compostable liner, which sits inside the neat kitchen caddy, which is being supplied as part of the 3-bin rollout. Or you can wrap your food scraps in newspaper, or simply put them straight into the bin, which is collected each week. And what about weeds and prunings and dead plants? Where do they go? Well, it's the bin with the lime green lid. I'm loving the fact that into this bin goes all the natural stuff from your garden. The lawn clippings, the leaves, weeds, plants, prunings and palm fronds can go straight in, and so can the dog poo and kitty litter. If you use a bag, just make sure it's compostable, not plastic. And then, council turns it into amazing compost, which will go back into the gardens and parks. Win-win, a bit of recycling.
So as you see, FOGO takes everything, all the organic waste. Could be dog poo, could be food, could be plants, anything. So it's a one-stage solution to all the organic waste. So our proposal is that we collect mixed food and green waste, food in compostable or paper bags, and green go directly in an organic bin. It's collected weekly, composted, and that compost can be marketed and sold. When we add the new collection, now we are talking about diverting 50% of the rubbish. So the rubbish collections can be changed from weekly to fortnightly, especially when most of the smelly stuff will be out of that bin. Also, when we make it fortnightly, that means we are cutting the collection cost. So even though FOGO will be weekly collection, we will only be paying a fortnightly collection cost effectively. There will be concerns if there are bigger families with fortnightly collection of rubbish, but Council currently provides options for a bigger bin or multiple bin at an extra cost. And when people have to pay for additional rubbish, that means they will probably try and minimize waste in a better way. So that's a win-win situation for us. We did a high-level cost modeling to understand what it would cost. So we have got the first column where we have got business as usual. So if we do nothing, the landfill costs are going to go up in next 2-3 years. And we are looking at somewhere between $800K to $1 million increase, and that will increase the rates. In a baseline case, it will go up by $33. And if we do each of these, GoFo, mix of GoFo and FOGO, that will offset some of these costs. And if you look at the bottom, the numbers, so Go will cost us $34, $442. Go and Fo is the most expensive because of 2 collections, $76. And then we have got FOGO at $32. And if you see, FOGO actually turned out to be cheaper than just the green waste collection. And what if we don't meet the 40% diversion target? So if you look at the numbers below, even if we divert 30% of the waste, 30% of the waste, it will only cost us about $41 per household per year. And so in terms of cost, it's actually quite reasonable. Now, in terms of impact, current recycling services, the blue crate and yellow bin, we collect over 5,000 tons per year of recyclables. But FOGO has got potential to divert about 8,000 tons of waste per year. And not just that, if you are looking at a local composting facility, currently Rotorua Council diverts 5,500 tons of green waste from landfill, about 9,500 tons of biosolids from wastewater treatment plant. We have got so many eateries, restaurants, and we are, even by a conservative estimate, will be at least 2,000 to 3,000 tons of food waste per year from those eateries. So overall, Rotorua has 20,000 to 25,000 tons of compostable material every year, and a local composting facility can produce over 10,000 tons of compost that will go to our ground, that will close the loop between sanitation and agriculture, food and agriculture, and benefit the environment. So there are four major benefits. Of course, the circular economy, closing the loop between food and agriculture. Climate change is another major advantage. So we are not talking about capturing methane and burning methane or producing electricity, which we are doing currently. The diversion of organic waste ensures complete elimination of methane generation at the source. So your landfill will not have material which will produce methane. No mitigation actions are required. We are going to have New Zealand's first anaerobic digestion facility in Rotorua, and this project gives us opportunity to also create a composting facility. So if that happens, we'll become the first city in Rotorua to have both the sustainable technologies. And finally, around us in Rotorua, if you see Hamilton, Tauranga, Hamilton has launched food waste collection. Tauranga and Te Puke, they are going to launch. Whakatane has green waste. Rupehu has recently launched food waste collections. Taupo is considering one. And so by providing these services, we'll be consistent with the norms, and of course we'll have a very good environmental outcome. So our recommendation to the Council is to begin public consultation on FOGO, and it's part of our LTP. And of course, if everything goes well, then we launch the service next financial year. Thank you. I'll be happy to answer questions.
Thank you, Prashad. Before we'll take any questions, just a quick reminder that you started a journey of managing your waste activities better since 2016-17. You moved into households waste collection on base of bins and recycling. The recycling has increased almost double what it used to be in 2017. You've closed and capped your landfill, minimized emissions and so on. You continue to explore options to further impact positively on the climate change and obviously create a circular economy at the local level. As a matter of service provision to the community, I don't know if any of you got green waste collection from your own houses. The average cost is somewhere between $230 and $250 a year. And obviously the estimates for this service, if you do it because of the efficiency of scale, you can do it for about $60 a year. It still, in an orthodox economic investment, still does not beat the actual cost of landfilling. But if you consider it as a multi-criteria undertaking, and that's what we'll be talking to the community, obviously it does make sense for the future and achieving some of our goals. So, happy to discuss questions, because if you're happy with that, then we will start preparing for consultation for next year. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll open for questions now. Your Worship.
Fantastic. Next step, it'd be interesting to get the community feedback. The bit I didn't get is where's the digester? So the capital outlay for the, putting it all together, is that the Rotorua site? Are we just going to add green waste to food waste on the Rotorua site? Or do we build a new one of those digesters?
So the Rotorua site, it's anaerobic digestion. It will only take food waste.
Right.
It won't accept green waste. So if we are going to divert both food and green, we still have to look for a green waste disposal facility. However, if we are going to set up a composting facility here in Rotorua, we can send both food and green there. So what we are suggesting is that we compost both food and green and not digest.
And the only other question on that is sometimes scaling up is a good thing, and I remember when the bill came out, there were areas like Kawerau very keen to join in some collection systems in the region, and others were then a bit unsure about the benefits. Is this any value in scaling up the capital outlay to take other waste from other areas? Because you've got the offsetting then of travel costs.
So absolutely, that's something that's going to be considered as we dive deeper into this. Once we have the community's support behind this and we continue to proceed, we'll be looking at, well, what does it look like? Are other TLAs interested in shipping their green waste to us? But one of the great outcomes out of this will be a new local industry on land here for local people. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Rothwell.
Thank you, Prashant. I think you've made huge progress with this project, because I know we've been discussing it for a while. My question is around supplementing the overall system with education for people about what they can do in their own homes to reduce the amount of waste going out to the bigger system. And I'm thinking of things like, at present, we use a Bokashi system, anaerobic system at home, which is quite simple to do, and we also have compost. And I think a lot of people would be able to do that if they had a little bit more knowledge as to how that might work in their own homes. Are you doing anything along that educational side of things?
Thank you for the question. We've got a new waste minimization officer, and currently we are in the process of doing a strategic assessment for waste minimization projects, and assisting households for home composting is part of that plan. So as it develops further, we'll update you.
Thank you. We have Councillor Yates, followed by Mr. Hurd, Bentley, Kumar, Wang, Mr. Waru, and then Councillor Kaifong.
And through you, Madam Chair, nei rā te mihi anō kia koutou. How exciting. I want this to start tomorrow, because I am one of those ones that have an extraordinary bill to pay each year. So this would be great. Can't come soon enough. I did want to also pick up on the education side of things, and education is going to be critical. So I do think educational packs would be great. So if that could be followed up, that would be awesome. My question is around the final product of the compost. Is there a possibility for that at some point in time to become revenue for council?
We have not yet gone into detailed planning how it will be operated, but this will definitely be a source of revenue at some stage.
Thank you. Mr. Hurd.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Closely allied to Councillor Yates' question, actually, I was going to ask, I was going to say, first of all, that from a climate change and sustainability perspective, no-brainer. Very nice presentation, thank you. But in terms of the composting itself, do we have any information on, is that a profitable business? Do we have any idea on what scale we're going to go to make it profitable, and how much waste we would need, etc.? It could Rotara alone service an economic project of this nature, or is it possible to create an economic project at all? Is really my question.
I think the simple answer to that question is that we do not have all the details for that yet. And my personal view at this point in time is that we need to be very careful as to whether we as a council actually create that industry. I think the key for us is to identify partners who can work with. Remember, we do have a specialized industry who got expertise and knowledge behind it, and obviously by offering them some guaranteed volumes of green waste or organic waste, it helps, with that process. However, having said that, after we go on in parallel with consultation, we really need to explore the business case to say, well, if we did invest our own money, do we have some, does it make business sense, to do it ourselves? So we don't have the answers yet, but we will do it. Remember, a lot of our wastewater biosolids at the moment are taken by a composting company, and they're consented and licensed to compost and apply to land. So the question is that maybe they can expand here. Maybe we can have a local, our franchise, our local process. And at that point in time, we might decide whether it makes sense, a business sense for us to be involved. But we would expect to have this conversation with you as elected members and give you I suppose, a solid business case before, a final recommendation to that. At this point in time, we'll be asking the community if they're happy to pay a targeted levy to remove that green waste, and organic waste, from their waste stream. And then we have to decide in parallel what are the best options to manage it.
Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a question for Stavros, and thank you too for your presentation. It was most interesting. The new facility to be built, Stavros, do you anticipate that would also be able to use the sewage sludge?
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. I think that's a fundamental question. As Prashant said, we generate organic waste. A biosolid is one of them. So the question, and I don't know the answer, but I will have to do a business case to say, instead of contracting that to someone else, can it be done here? Can be done here at a viable cost, basis. We have to work for it. But certainly, yes.
Councillor Kumar.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the Chair, thank you so much, Stavros and Reagan and Namaste Prashant. My question is largely based on the cost of it. I believe we've seen some cost you mentioned, but is that on everyone signing up after the consultations? Is that what we likely looking at what the cost is?
Yeah, it is based on the current targeted rate for waste collection. If we're having, I can't remember off my head, exactly about 25,000 targeted rates for rubbish collection, then everybody pays another $50, $60 on top of that, and actually gets the service.
Just a supplementary question to that, is it going to be rolled out by SMART, or is it going to be another contract, someone else looking at that?
That'll be, once the project's been given a go, that'll become part of a procurement process, which Council obviously has procurement policy which we'll run through. Part of that consideration, of course, will be, does an incumbent have an advantage, i.e. machinery that is able to offer a better price than perhaps what a competitor may be or not, but that will need to be explored. The other part I just wanted to touch on your earlier question too around the costs. These numbers you've seen today are based around what we know is going to happen around the taxation that the government is introducing on the waste being disposed of at landfill. And we know the government is bringing this in to deter or reduce the amounts of that happening. It's going to continue. If you look at New Zealand, we're one of the cheapest in the world to dispose of waste. So we're only looking at 3 years here. I think if we go further, you'll see this increase more. But of course, all this waste which we divert, which is proposed by this, will not attract that taxation. So the financial business case for it improves over time, would be my guess.
Sorry, Madam Chair, if I may just indulge. While I'm really excited about this project, and I think I have spoken to Dr. Prashant about this before as well, with the great expectations, I am also a little wary because there are also a lot of small contractors there already in this business, and my concern goes out to them.
I'll just touch that quickly. This will create a much larger industry than what we currently have. Yes, small individual operators may be affected, but the people working in this industry is going to grow if this was going to go in.
Yeah, and thank you for answering that, Regan, because I also see the opportunity for any job losses to be absorbed into what will be a much better industry, or will essentially create an industry, which is excellent. We have Councillor Wang, Mr Waru, Councillor McPherson and Councillor Donaldson.
Kia ora, Madam Chair, thank you. Can I just signal that I'd just like to move recommendation 1 and 2? But firstly, I'd just like to say this is really, really exciting. The prospect of the FOGO process and actually diverting that amount of organic waste from our landfill and possibly reducing our emissions as a district by, I think it was 6%, wasn't it? That is massive, and it's such an exciting and innovative thing for us to do. And I'm looking at our process compared to some of the other processes that are offered right now and collections that are offered. They have the limitations with seafood and meats and flax and other things as well. And so this is great. The question I had was with the rollout of this the FOGO, would it just be to urban curbside? Would it just be urban curbside collection at the start, or would it be lakes and rural as well?
I think at this stage we have only considered urban for the calculations, but we'll see once the community approves it and it goes ahead. There will always be options to extend it.
Thank you. And I've just sought clarification. We don't officially need to move this as a recommendation as it's not on our agenda, but it is signalled, and unless there's anyone that thinks contrary, we'll proceed with going out to public consultation. But thank you. We have Mr. Waru.
Tēnā koe te chairmana, tēnā koutou. He rawa ngā kōrero nei, korona tātou me te mauri o Papatuanuku, so yeah. So thank you. It's about time that we've, and I know the government has sort of aligned itself to the scope of those parts, so it's time. There's a saying, ka pau te torea, so when the tide's out, the oyster picker goes for it. So we need to do that now. And I'd like to see it actually get some legs quickly. I know there's a consultation process and everything to come. Now that's what my taha Māori on. This. Tēnei mea te mātauranga Māori he rawe. And this is really, I want to talk to you about the Marakai model. So there's the compost and everything like that. However, I think what we probably might pay for this council to think about expanding the idea around Marakai and things like that, having our own food sovereignty. Rotorua Lakes food technology is an area that's growing and has been growing since day dot, and it will keep growing because population keeps growing. So, I think a little bit wider too, not just what we're dealing with how we're dealing with the waste, turning it into compost, paitera, but then, then what? And I think if we're just doing that and pushing it out, let's try and create some kind of industry here. It's essentially what I'm hearing is going to be another CCO of the council, maybe. Engari, I think there's a bigger opportunity here too. So that's a real great start, and I think we need that to get started so that we can bring that other stuff forward. The question I actually have now is, what is it, 2022, 2023? So is that when the decision is going to be made, or the actual kaupapa will be going?
I might just ask our democracy manager to answer that in terms of timing, because we currently have the LCP process, but I'll get her to clarify.
Sure.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you for letting me clarify that. So just to sort of put in context today, the team have come before you with a proposal that they do intend to take out for consultation. That consultation will need to go out to the community. However, it will not go out today, right at this point in time. Remember, we do have an LTP engagement, and in the mahi consultation there are some really robust conversations that you need to have with your community. So we are always very conscious about not putting too many conversations onto our community at any one time. So today is signalling to you that this is going to come and will go out to our wider community, and it will happen after we've gone through the LTP process. So in terms of timing, it's likely that once we get through all of the LTP, consultation around this can proceed, and if the community are highly supportive of it, that would come back to you, and then there would be a conversation for what that means in terms of informing people about additions to the targeted rate commencing for year 2 of the long-term plan.
Tēnā koe, Una. And just one more little addition to my kōrero, Stavros, probably for you really, the business case when you're putting it together. I think, by te kaupapa nei, I'd like to sort of see this kaupapa being able to, and shaped up in a way where it pays for itself. Because I know we all want to look after the whenua, we all want to look after our environment and stuff, but I'd like to see that, you know, some of our ratepayers try and keep them in mind as well. Kia ora.
Yeah, thank you, Warren. We will do it.
Councillor McPherson.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, my question directly follows the comments from my colleague. And first of all, thank you very much for the presentation. A whole set of new ideas and quite illuminating. And I wondered when we start to conceptualise the business case that we might regard ratepayers, residents as a different type of partner, apart from commercial expert partners who can bring a lot to this business case development. But if we think about the quite a large number of people in our area are home gardeners, and they customarily compost almost everything from their homes and from the garden and so on. Is there a way we can build a partnership between them and incentivise the spreading of home gardening and composting at home so it complements the other part of the business case? I haven't thought this through fully yet, but I'd like to be able to imagine that there are a set of incentives that would create conditions whereby more and more people would get into home gardening, home food production. And I'll leave it there. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you for your suggestion. And over the years, there has been significant work around the waste minimisation, and Council has in the past run workshops or encouraged the likes of the Bokashi composting and all worm farms as well. So I'm sure it will be a part of a stream of that work too. We have Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, great presentation and pretty exciting stuff. I just wanted to refer to slide 8, which was on the options or the proposal for consideration and consultation. And the options, so, you know, we have an ageing community. We have, on average, I think it is about 2.6 occupants in every household in the district. And but a larger number are just retired single or couples who don't produce a lot of red bin material. And I know myself, our household would struggle to fill a red bin in a week without the FOGO. I just wonder if there's an option there for, I know you've rationalised that by bringing the red bin collection down to a fortnight instead of weekly, but is there an option for you've got bigger bins at extra cost, is there an option for smaller red bins at less cost going in as part of the consultation?
Thank you for this, Jess. We'll consider that. There's a number of angles you've got to take on it, notwithstanding that bins aren't the cheapest, so perhaps getting a smaller one, another 25,000 of them may affect the longer term, but we'll definitely consider that. Thank you.
Councillor Kaifong, did you have a question?
My question actually just follows on from what Councillor Donaldson, I was going to, just when you were talking about the figures with up to 63% reduction, and even though you're going to fortnightly collection, whether a smaller red bin would be an option. So it was just along those lines. My second question was just around the dump. So would people still be able to dump green waste then at the dump at no cost, or if you've got larger things that don't fit in a green bin, like a tree trunk or flax or something?
Yes, so there's no proposal in the change of service at the transfer station where we currently have green waste diversion, so that shouldn't be affected. Yep.
Well, there appear to be no further questions. Look, I want to thank you all for the work that you've done behind the scenes on this. I know for a few years now, elected members have been asked, when can we and will we get organic waste collection? So it really is very exciting for many of us to see this finally on the table and going out for consultation. I see huge cost savings in this by going to any of those approaches, really, because I'm blown away that 60 to 70% of curbside refuse is actually compostable. That's hugely significant. So I'm excited to see what the community thinks about this as well and how we can proceed. And also very interested to see that of the 24,000 households that we have here in Rotorua, whether our rural and lakeside communities would want this waste collection, photo collection as well. So thank you very much. And I also want to welcome you, Dr. Prashant Praveen, as well. It's wonderful to have you here as our Waste Service and Sustainability Manager and to bring all the expertise and experience that you have as well. So since it's your first time officially presenting to us, I want to give you a very warm welcome from elected members as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, everyone.
Madam Chair, thank you. That was 2 parts, and I will leave the rest of my report as take it as read, and happy to respond to any questions you might have for the O&M report, in my report. I think Councillor Donaldson had some questions about something. The honor.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. Yeah, so quite I guess a concern for the whole community, but certainly the Ngāpuna community close to myself, and got some feedback at last night's engagement session. So it was just some, I guess, clarity about I read the Pānui that a wastewater main had failed, and this had contributed the rubble and the silt that had blocked the pumping station, and I was interested to know where that wastewater main was and any reason why it may have failed. That was, and now I have another question, Madam Chair, after that.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. If you allow me, I want to take a little bit of a diverted view onto this, because I have also been approached by people asking similar questions, and I do monitor social media too, to see what questions arising out of it. So this is not happening in isolation. But can I remind councillors that about this time last year, we started the final recommendation for actually engaging into a performance-specified operations and maintenance contract for our wastewater services. We've had extensive feedback, hearings, debates, and so on. But there are some key facts, that I want to remind, people around the table, that we do have an aging wastewater system network. We have identified through our diagnostics that over 60% of our pipe network, is in poor condition. We have identified that in order to mitigate those perceived risks, identified risks, the performance specified operation and maintenance contract with Trinity was one of the many ways we would mitigate those risks. These incidents that took place in recent times, are just manifestations of that kind of aging of our network. But also, to some degree, I am a little bit concerned that I also read and see comments with regards to why do we have a fault into the network. Very soon you will consider into your annual performance indicators what you call a non-financial KPIs. And if you go into your wastewater system network, you'll identify that we are actually planning or expecting about 10 faults per 1,000 connections into the network. In other words, we do expect, because of the stage and aging of our system, to have somewhere between 250 and 300 events of this nature each year. This is not news. It should not be news. It's something that we've been incurring a number of times. So what we have tried to identify through this new way of managing our contract, is how to mitigate the risks arising from that. A similar event to what happened in Honor Street, it happened to Victoria Street, and I showed elected members a good picture when the soffit of the main interceptor pipe collapsed because of geothermal activity. If you recall that picture I showed to you, what's happened in Hannah Street is that you've got what we call a control point where a 900 millimeter pipe coming from the eastern suburbs carrying wastewater intersects with the influent that comes from the Okareka grinder, low pressure grinder pumps. They intersect together, and from there, from the control point in about 10-15 meters away is a pump station that's about 6 meters below ground level. And because of ground level differentiations, it pumps wastewater from the eastern suburbs into the treatment plant. And from there, from the treatment plant gets treated and so on. What happened in this event here is that a section of the pipe between the control point and the pump station, and that's the 900 millimeter pipe, a concrete pipe, its soffit collapsed because of increasing turbulence and groundwater levels. The problem with that is that with the collapsing, that allows a lot of rubble to go into the top of the pipe, and that rubble went to the pump station. The pump station started getting blocked. So we started to divert and clear the debris to identify the problem. We installed 3 pumps. No, we didn't. Clearly they did. Installed pumps to create a bypass of that system. And we were making good progress. Unfortunately, on the Wednesday the 30th, with a storm, we had 45 millimeters of rain. It just gushed a lot more water into that and created a lot of surcharge into the network, which caused us a few more problems. You will see in the new media and our communications that we've used divers, the specialist divers, to clear the debris. Last night, additional work has been done by Trinity, where they have installed a temporary soffit into the collapsed pipe. From there, they will rectify the problem inside the pump station and reline the 900 millimeter pipes, hopefully tonight. There are significant costs to the activity. I would estimate, close to $300,000, over the last few nights. We don't incur these costs. It's part and parcel of the fixed costs of having a contractor do this. We supervise their work, we interact with the contractor, and obviously we have an interest to talk to the local community and provide advice and so on, but really the responsibility is not ours now, it is the contractor's responsibility. I wanted to again remind us that we do have an aging system. We do expect somewhere between up to 300, similar types of faults every year. It's in our KPIs. We're not exceeding that at this point in time. We don't expect to exceed them. We expect them to continue to be reduced because we have a better management system. Thank you.
Thank you for that answer, and appreciate the transparency around all this, and I'm sure that Trinity are not surprised that these events are occurring as well, and it's great to see the way they've responded. I don't know how you pay anyone enough to go diving into that pump, but well done to that man. Or woman. So my other question, Madam Chair, was on page 19 regarding the East Rotorua wastewater scheme. And in the commentary on the right, there's about the cost variances to the initial estimate. And I know through some great collaboration between the CFOs of this council and regional council, there's a recommendation from the Lake Strategy Group for a deed reset. So has that happened? Do we know that? And how are we getting on with communicating to the community the most recent cost estimate for that scheme?
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. I think I will stay at high level at this point in time. Yes, the project has experienced some cost variances due to between its initial estimate back in 2014 to date. We have taken steps to contain some of these costs, but remember we are also part and parcel that lake is a beneficial lake under the deed of funding for the MFE. In February, the strategy group have agreed to mitigate those costs to the level of 50%. We are right now supplied all the relevant information to the Ministry of the Environment, and we are asking them to rebalance, the contribution on the basis of the fact that the deed funding has not been adjusted for inflation for the last 15 years. In the meantime, at the local level, we are incurring those costs. The ministry has promised to give us a direction within the next couple of weeks. And once we have that information, we will come back to you because we've got one final contract to recommend to you, and we cannot recommend that contract to you yet until we actually have the answer from the MFE. Once we have that answer, we'll report back to you with a full, history and, where we are and what are the net cost implications on the local, ratepayers, and then we'll talk to, everyone. Thank you.
Thank you, Stavros. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bentley.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a query for Stavros. Having recently had a conversation with a few people out at Rotara, that they're still expressing some dissatisfaction with regard to the lowering of the speed limit outside the school, and I'm just wondering if you have had any contact with them of recent times.
Thank you, Councillor Bentley. No, to be honest, I haven't. I know we are reducing the speeds of, outside those schools and through variable signs and so on, but I'm sorry, I haven't had any contact with them recently, but I'll follow that. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Wang.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just to reply to Councillor Bentley's question, on Tuesday night, we went to Te Whakaitu as a rural community board to get the submissions from the community there for the lowering of the speed outside the school, and all of them were in favour. We had a turnout of about 20 to 30 people, and they all came out to support the lowering of the speed for the area outside the school. So yeah, there has been those conversations there.
Thank you. Were there any other questions for the infrastructure group? So this is in your agenda from page 17 to page 26. Yes, Mr. Waru.
Kia ora anō, Stavros. They had the hui last night, and a couple of the things that came my way. I just want to ask you how to get the hoio. I think it was around, I just want to sort of understand what this 1%, an annual 1% thing for pipeworks replacement or something like that. Could you possibly expand on that? What does that mean? Because they weren't too sure, and I think because they weren't too sure, they just objected to everything. So, if you could.
Thank you, Tewaru. I wasn't there, but I think I assume the 1% pipe replacement relates to what we call the depreciation of assets. You build an asset at any given time, and you have to assign to it a design life. And the design lives could be anything between 5 years and 100 years, depending on the asset it is. If you take into our entire wastewater network, for example, with a value of about $450 million at the moment, you've got various components, you've got different life expectations into that. On average, we're saying that we are renewing that asset at 1.5% a year, which means that the average life of that asset is about 75 years. And therefore, I think what we're saying that, in terms of infrastructure, asset management and replacement values, that if we do it systematically over the years, that means every 75 years, the entire asset gets replaced, gets renewed. We do have some historical backlog. We just have to catch up with that. But obviously, that is that's the percentage you're talking about.
Okay, so it's all on the program. Just another quarter or so. As you're probably aware, they don't want it there. Our whanaunga there in Ngāpuna. They don't want their pump station there. They don't want anything to do with sewage. So what they were asking was why, now that we're not going into the lake with the wastewater, is why can't that be, why can it not be taken away from there now, from going through their area in Ngāpuna?
May I clarify, are we talking about the sewage pipes going through Napuna or the treatment plant? Because I've heard stories about people, because I went to a meeting in
Napuna.
So they wanted the treatment plant to be removed from there, or the pipes and the pump station to remove from them.
The pipes.
Okay.
What they were talking about.
Deborah, I think, sorry, just because it's not on your report, and clearly it is a significant issue for this group, can I suggest that perhaps you take that away and you can have a look into it and then have a korero with Mr. Waru himself for the feedback. It just is quite a significant diversion to what we have on the agenda.
I was only following on from the sewage korero.
Madam Chair, may I need your hand?
I'm happy.
Because I'm happy with that. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
Nope, there appear to be no furthermore. Thank you very much, Deborah. Thank you, Regan. We now invite Gina Rangi, our Group Manager for Manahautu Māori, and we are on page 26 of our agenda.
Tēnā tātou ia ku rangatira. So I'll take the bulk of my report as read. You'll see that there were a significant number of activities happening over February. But I did want to highlight the submission that was made on the local electoral Māori ward and Māori constituencies amendment bill. A submission was made on the bill in support of removing the poll provisions for Māori wards and enabling the establishment of Māori wards and constituencies for the 2022 triennial elections. So essentially our submission described our local experience in Rotorua, highlighting that prior to the establishment of the Te Aroha Partnership, ineffective relationships with Te Aroha had led to serious delays to major projects. And reminding ourselves that Te Aroha themselves led an extensive engagement process to develop and propose a partnership model which was received and then consulted on by Council. That ultimately led to the signing of the partnership agreement and to the establishment of Te Tapau o Te Aroha. The reasons we gave for the submission in support were, and I'm summarising here, but essentially the Principal Act, the Local Electoral Act, requires fair and effective representation for individuals and communities and fair representation of electors. And in some districts, Māori wards are one of the few available mechanisms to actually meet this requirement. So whereas Rotorua tends to have elected members who are Māori and who are well connected into that space, there are many other district councils and regional councils that don't and are not really representative of the communities that they work for. And so having this as one tool in the toolkit is a means for those districts that need it to provide for fair and effective representation. So we weren't so much making comment on our own need for wards as providing that as a mechanism, as a legal mechanism, that the bill was a useful thing. The other aspects in support of the submission were that local government still needs to foster effective relationships with mana whenua, and Māori wards are not the sole or necessarily even the best means to engage. So the idea that establishing Māori wards then takes away the requirements to engage directly with mana whenua is quite wrong. But again, it is one of the tools. And the final reason for the submission is essentially that the poll process is not a good process. It reduces complex issues of representation to a simple binary choice of yes or no. And that encourages people to take sides. That's very damaging to community cohesion. And the noise surrounding the whole poll process tends to damage our credibility and reputation in the eyes of the community. Whether we want it to or not, that's the outcome of having quite divisive kōrero happening. I think probably the main thing I wanted to also highlight is that these discussions around the place of Māori wards and of representation need to be taken directly with mana whenua and with the community to understand their preferences and values. and Māori wards are not necessarily the only option, but they are a very useful tool. Tēnā tātou. Are there any questions?
Kia ora, Gina. Yes, Your Worship.
That, Gina, is it Te Tātou who's going to pick up the kōrero with mana whenua?
Well, we at Council have had no inquiries from the Māori community around the establishment of wards, but I would say that we do often get requests from mana whenua to review the relationship. And so it's important to distinguish between those mana whenua agreements, which we have been leading and engaging directly with iwi, and the engagement with Māori generally around Māori wards. So in that regard, I am aware that, yes, Te Tātou are carrying out some consultation and are likely to outline to the Council shortly what the results of that consultation are.
Thank you. Councillor Maxwell, followed by Councillor Kumar.
Thank you. Thank you, Gina, for your good report on this. Nice and brief, and I'm pleased that it's been successful, especially for those areas that do not have any representation at all. And then also a bit of disappointment just only last week, one of our councils in New Zealand did not even support it being Hamilton, and that's in the news. Whereas I like what you said in your final line, the Māori ward should not be viewed as the only option or even potentially the best option. So thank you for your report, and so the process from here now is we have a certain date to have this decision done by. What's that date again? Please refresh my memory.
I might just ask Una to answer that on what so the question is, what is the timeframes or the dates on the Māori wards discussion?
Somewhere before.
Through you, Madam Chair, I think just a reminder that the date is 21st of May. However, that is a constricted time frame because before this piece of legislation was brought in, the time to have made a decision on whether or not to introduce Māori wards was actually back in November of last year. So this legislation, of course, has prompted all of those discussions which for Rotorua had not been signalled to us through our relationships with mana whenua groups. So we are now in a position where to make a decision is to make one within a very constricted time frame and potentially without an opportunity to discuss widely with the community the option to introduce Māori wards. So there, as Gina has highlighted, Te Tātou are undertaking some work, but this council as well needs to consider a position around the introduction of Māori wards or to support. So there are a number of options, and we will be looking to provide some additional opportunities for you to discuss that, so that in alignment with a position that may come through from Te Tātou, you are well informed as to where to go to next.
Thank you, Una, for that. And just to end on what I was mentioning is that, firstly, and having gone around the community currently at the moment, there isn't a great groundswell of change from what we've got at the moment, which is, I think, working very well with Te Aroha Tātou. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Kumar, followed by Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And through the Chair, thank you, Gina, for your report. In case I've just missed something because of my ignorance, but just wanted to know, Gina, and it's a simple question. Did you, while you've submitted your report based on was it based on conversation with all the iwis? Did you go to all the iwis and get the information whether they want Māori wards, or is...
Thank you for the question. So no, because the submission was not saying what should happen for this council. It was simply saying that the ability for a community to decide to have Māori wards is a good thing. It is one of the only ways to have fair and effective representation in some districts, but it was not saying that for this district we should or should not do it. It was simply saying that the legislation and the framework in the legislation should be broad enough to allow communities to have those discussions.
Thank you. Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. First, a comment. Gina, thank you for your comments in the Sport, Recreation and Environment section of your report. Getting Tika Tukutuku reopened in time for Easter was a wonderful achievement, and it was quite a sort of a healing ceremony, I think, out there when it was re-blessed and reopened. With Rangatihi and the two chairs. So, there wasn't a car park to be had either side of the forest, and there wasn't a hire bike to be had in Rotorua over the weekend. So it's already being celebrated. And also really exciting, I note your cultural advice regarding the Australasian Police and Emergency Services Games. So delighted that the Trans-Tasman bubble has arrived to enable the launch of that in September. Just a question, that there's still some Heritage New Zealand work to be done to clear a couple of pinch points in that Forest Loop ride. Do we have any update on when that Heritage New Zealand advice or inspection will take place?
I don't have them, but it may be that Rob Keithley may be able to answer that.
Thank you, Gina, and through the Chair. There are two approvals being sought, one for the extension of Tika Tukutuku and one for around the Titokarangi Ridge. The Titokarangi Ridge the Titokarangi Ridge application hasn't been put into Heritage New Zealand yet, because we've only just in the last week received the archaeologist report, and so some work with mana whenua is going to happen before that gets submitted. Likewise, the archaeologist has done the walk on the Tika Tukutuku section, is just preparing the report, but we expect that to be perhaps less controversial than the Titokarangi Ridge area, so we're hoping to get those in and sorted out very soon.
Thank you. Mr. Waru.
Tēnā koe te mana. Kia ora, Gina, tēnā koe. Rawa te reporter ne. This Amorangi unit of this is busy bees. E nui ngā mahi, infrastructure, operation strategy, business support, e tahi atu kaupapa te reo Māori translations, it's all going lovely to see. E rā mea katoa. Engari, ko taku pātai, ahua tuana ki te taha ki ngā kaupapa here. So, I just want to, has there been any work done, or is there some being planned to be done around updating maybe our Tūtea Waitangi Māori policy nei I roto I te kauhera?
I understand you're asking about the policy framework rather than the work that we're doing at an operational level.
Nothing against rawe tēnā mahi, so.
Actually, there are a number of work programs that we're working through at the moment, but one of the things that is on my radar is the outcomes framework, and Una and I met on that earlier this week to think about how we frame or how we describe the outcomes that we're trying to achieve in terms of the Te Aroha partnership and across the whole of the organisation. So it is an ongoing piece of work.
Good to hear. Kia ora.
Your Worship, followed by Councillor Yates.
Yes, just a commendation really to a meeting that I attended with Jocelyn Makari about the Tātou Pōnami Collective Digital Inclusion Project. This was a very exciting initiative led by Eastside Collective Te Tātou Pōnamu, and wonderful to see our IT guys involved in helping with the IT component, and I think a separate one day, once they've got the funding from Internal Affairs and done their research, it'll be a great presentation to Council to see how partnerships and hubs can work.
Thank you. Councillor Yates.
Kia ora, and thank you through you, Madam Chair. Nei rā te mihi kia koe, Gina. He kōwhiringa tēnei e pāna ki ngā reti, so just following up on the rates piece that you have in there, and obviously yesterday or the day before there was the latest bill announced. Can you perhaps enlighten me or us what that impact will be for our council, please?
I'm aware that Thomas's team is currently preparing a piece of advice looking at what the operational changes will be. Most of our policy for the Māori, for rates on Māori land was already aligned with the changes. So when they were looking at examples of good policy around the country, they did look at our policy as an example of rating frameworks for Māori land. But there are some technical changes that might affect us, and there's a piece of analysis being done in the finance team at the moment to understand that, and within my team, Ben Manley is supporting that work.
Thank you. And one final question from Councillor Maxwell.
Yes, I spoke earlier on the Māori Awards. I didn't go to the other report yet. But I want to, through Gina, congratulate our Te Morangi unit for hosting and running the 2-day Treaty of Waitangi course out at Kia Ora Marae and Horo for councillors and lakes and rural board and Te Tate o Te Arawa. So I thought it was excellent, tremendous 2 days there. So it's a big thanks to the organisers and Te Morangi unit, and congratulate Councillor Raj Kumar as being co-master out there, and tremendous, and I was Captain Hobson, so they were wonderful. Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Thanks very much, Gina. We now move to our strategy group report from JP Gaston on page 28.
Afternoon, everyone. I'd just like to take the report that's before you as read, though I would just like to acknowledge the library team and the museum team who also worked really well in the child equity space. So it's really wonderful to be able to draw from the rest of the organisation to help inspire young people in that child equity program. So a big thumbs up to those teams who are involved in that space. So apart from that, happy to answer any other questions. Probably the biggest piece I will be presenting to you will be in the confidential section, just around a housing update. So this is the other work that's being undertaken across the team.
Thank you, JP. Mr. Waru.
Kia ora rā, anō te tia mana. Kia ora, JP. Kia ora. Hai pēhea koe, hai koe. Cool. Hey, just looking at those big projects, the museum, the Shimpack, Aquatic Centre, Lakefront, Aharane, there's a lot going on. But I didn't really see any end dates, and I know you've sort of given dates here and there just to, as a guess, I suppose, a guesstimate. But now that we're getting closer to finishing off parts of those things, when do you see them being finished?
You're actually grabbing me then when actually those are probably Jocelyn questions. So a lot of those projects are being implemented through Jocelyn's team. So museum, aquatic, lakefront project and the forest projects are fully into those implementation phases. So could we hold those questions, and Rob and Jocelyn can probably get ready for those.
Aroha mai, just saw I was in operations with Mike.
Kate Pai. Any other questions? There appear to be none, but would now like to welcome Jocelyn to the table to overview her operations group report. And we are on page 30 to about page 42. Welcome, Jocelyn.
Kia ora tātou, hui hui mai nei tēnei, ahi I think, yes, ahi nai nei. I'm going to take my report as read also. Generally, we did have a wonderful opening at the Aquatic Centre last weekend, pool party in there. Memorial Plaza is now complete, and of course our Pukehangi plan change came through. Just wanted to also give a bit of a shout out to CLM and Unison, who have done a really good job of the Learn to Swim program in there and getting our tamariki across the district into water safety programs and generally learning to swim. But otherwise, shall I jump into your question around the...
If that's all right with our chair. Kia ora. And yeah, haven't heard that term shout out since my media radio DVDs. Kia ora.
Oh, I'll try and use it each time. I'll think of new ways to bring you all through. In terms of the Howard Morrison, we have indicated a date of February, March next year for final opening there. We have our lakefront at the moment, which will be completed to stage 4 by the end of this year, so most of it will be handing back by the end of the year, with the commercial and wharewaka left to be completed. The Aquatic Centre, the 50-metre pool is now completed outside. However, there is more work to be done inside, and of course the LTP is showing a more fabulous and larger project which we're hoping to get approval to do, but that will be for our community to decide for the new Aquatic Centre. And of course, in terms of the museum, we're currently working on finalising dates there. It says on our notice boards 2022, however, we haven't begun building yet. It won't be complete in 2022, I can assure everyone of that. We're wanting to ensure that we get our final detailed design completed before we start giving dates. So hopefully we'll be able to provide dates by the end of the year, but it won't be next year.
Okay, tēnā koe. Kia ora.
Thank you. Your Worship.
Thank you for that honest update about the museum, because we're asked all the time. Still great community passion for it. But in the meantime, if there is a bit of a delay, is there any possibility to get digital viewing development of the exhibition collections? I know it's cost, but we've got nothing, and we're trying to use other spaces, and that's working well. But we're not showing what we've got.
We do have our museum director, Lizzie Marvelly, here, and she is going to give a bit of a kōrero shortly around the paper that's before you. And I can get her to think about that, and we can have some kōrero about that. But, yep, absolutely. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any other questions? Yes, Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you. Thank you, Jocelyn, and tremendous to see the publicity last month regarding Sir Owen Glenn coming down and reviewing the progress down there, and seeing some of the other charitable organisations coming on board with funding and that as well. I still see that asbestos still a blooming problem for the program. Is that going to hold us up in progress at all for completion of Shimpact?
We do have identified some asbestos issues over time. There are likely to be more that we'll look at in the future. I mean, I never discount that there will be no more asbestos across any of the projects that we have, but we will come back as required to come and give further updates when they're available to us.
Thank you. And last question by Councillor Donaldson.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Kia ora, Jocelyn. I just wanted to ask a question on page 32 regarding the cultural storytelling for Te Whakareurua in Titokorangi Drive. But I can't let the opportunity pass to not pass on the the acknowledgement at the opening of Te Wharenui o Tūtiata recently by Prime Minister, where Sion acknowledged the partnership with Council on the development of Te Tokorangi Drive. I hear, the latest I hear is that they're having to install additional parking because their cafe they can't park all their cafe patrons, so that's become so popular. So well done to the strategy team, I think it is, who arranged that partnership with Sion. But just on the artworks, Jocelyn, I understand Te Pūtaki o Tawa were due to be completed by June 30, but the Te Tokorangi Drive installations, is there any update on how they're progressing?
Don't have the dates on hand, but we'll get them and bring them back through and let you know.
Thank you very much. Well, that appears to be all the questions. Thank you, Jocelyn. And that concludes our operational report. We now have our Rotorua Museum report. So I'd like to ask for a mover and a seconder for the motion that the report Rotorua Museum Te Whare Taonga o Te Aroa Digestion proposal be received. Moved by Mr. Waru, seconded by Councillor Kumar. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Thank you very much. I'd like to welcome Lizzie and Kat, I believe, as well. So Kat is our collections lead. Many of you would have seen her around. But a warm welcome to our new director for the museum, Lizzie Marvelly, who has been here for just about a year, I think. But due to COVID-19 last year, this is the first time that we've had you presenting to us. So very familiar face in Rotorua, but wonderful to have you on board as the director.
Ngā mihi nui, Madam Chair. E ngā rangatira mā tēnā koutou. E te papa, e te whare, e tērā whare, tēnā koutou. Ngā mihi nui e o koutou whai whakaro I tēnei rā. Ko au te kaihaupu o te wharetaanga o Te Aroa, no Te Aroa ahau, ko Lizzie Marvelly tōku ingoa. Thank you so much for having me here today. It is fantastic to be able to bring this kaupapa to you, this quite quirky kaupapa, as I'm sure many of you may have read the report about this report. So I wanted to jump in and just clarify really what we're here talking about today. The first question that most people think about when we're talking about museum collections and what happens to them when they get very large and unwieldy is deaccessioning. What is deaccessioning? It's the permanent removal of an object from the collection. It's a very normal procedure. I would like to actually establish a bit of a schedule of coming back to this committee annually with a deaccessions proposal. You'll see the reasons why in the coming slides, but basically we have a large collection and we haven't had a regular deaccession procedure. So the deaccession policy that you've all had, which I'll take as read, sets out some criteria that helps us to identify the objects that we need to consider for deaccession. Some of the ones I just want to quickly highlight, which are essential today, if it's in poor condition, if the object is a duplicate, if it's no longer appropriate to keep in a museum. For example, in the proposal today, we have a vial of mercury, which, as I'm sure you're aware, is a health and safety risk. And also, most importantly, if the object or item falls outside of the scope of the collection. So that's a collection policy scope. We have many methods to deaccession. That's also set out in the policy. Ones I'm going to talk about today are returning the item or the object to the donor or the donor's family, a gift or exchange to another appropriate institution, transfer within our museum, so it stays with us to be in our hands-on or education collection, destruction or recycling. I'll show you a couple of examples towards the end of this presentation of some items that are in very, very poor condition. And I just want to highlight repatriation. So we're not talking about repatriation today, but that might be a time when we might have to come back to the committee on a more ad hoc basis if we're sent a request to repatriate, for example, a taonga back home to its iwi. We do have some taonga in our collection that don't actually have provenance. So those are some of the parameters around deaccessioning. I just want to assure you that our team puts in some really thorough research before we identify any objects for deaccession. Now, the why. Why do we need to deaccession? I have some photographs before you. This is our storage facility, which I'm sure many of you have been to. Fantastic place. I love working out there, but very, very full. Even more full than it usually would be because our main museum building is closed. So we currently have statues in our photography collection, which is, a little bit of something to navigate. Historically, we have been collecting objects for decades, and many of them haven't actually really fallen into the scope. It may have been that they were collected before the policy was put in place, but we have quite a few things in our collection that just simply aren't relevant to Rotorua. They're very relevant to the donors, they're very relevant to other places, but not to us. So we need to refine our collection to make sure that our ratepayer money is being spent caring for objects, taonga, artworks that are significant to our Rotorua community. We also need to make sure that we make the best use of space that we have, particularly as we're preparing to get back into the main building. We're going to need some space to prepare our objects to go back on display. I just wanted to pull out a few individual items to give a bit of context around this. So there's a cowboy boot there, which you'll see. This is an ornament. It's wooden, and it was whittled in whitianga. The donor has since passed away. It has whitianga whittlers inscribed on the bottom of it. The donor has since passed away, and the family would dearly love this back as a memento. They had been waiting for a little while. The sheet music that you see here as well, it has no significance to the Rotorua Rohe, and it's duplicated elsewhere, but it has huge significance to the family of the donor. The people who donated these pieces of sheet music and some records were grandparents. They've now passed away. Their grandchildren would dearly love them back. So this is one of the main reasons for deaccessioning is these objects are never going to go on display. They are simply not relevant to our community, but we are actually acting as a bit of a barrier to these families getting these objects back. Another way we can deaccession is to transfer to other institutions, and I've highlighted here a couple of objects in this proposal that fit into that criteria. You'll see these scary-looking medical objects here, which I wouldn't want any doctor to come near me with, but they were used by a doctor in Papakura. They were never used here in Rotorua, and the family of that doctor would like to have them back so that they can place them in the care of the Papakura Museum. This doctor was quite a well-known local entity there. The souvenir cup that you see in the presentation, this depicts and commemorates Te Aroha. It has no relevance to us, but it has huge relevance to the Te Aroha Museum, and they've indicated that they are interested in adding it to their permanent collection. So it just kind of makes sense. It's really where these objects belong. There is also another slide that I think might be just missing there. So I'm just going to get Kat to bring around our giant prickly stick insect. We've affectionately named him Gazza because he is Australian, and he, as you can imagine, has no relevance to the Rotorua community or indeed to New Zealand. However, we have had him for quite a long time. What we are suggesting with some of the objects that have been identified in the proposal is that we transfer them to our education collection. Please don't open them. I can't guarantee what kind of chemicals might come out of there. But what we're suggesting is that we safely allow our tamariki to get up close and personal with some of these objects. While it's in our collection, we can't usually actually allow people to pass it around like we are today. We're making a bit of an exception. But you can imagine that whilst he's not relevant to our community, our place, he's a source of wonder for young children, and they can learn about other insects in other countries. And there are lots of things that have been identified in this proposal that could then go into our education collection. So just to sum up, some of the benefits of deaccessioning will mean that our families that have donated particular objects will have these heirlooms returned. We'll be able to free up space and resources. It's not free to store these things. The collection team spends a significant amount of time caring for all of our objects, and we need to make sure that they're the right objects for our people in our place. We need to make sure our collection is more relevant for Rotorua. That means, at the moment we have items like Gaza who are taking up space, who could that space could be used for something that's really, really relevant to our people in Rotorua. Other regions will benefit from the return of the objects that are relevant to them, for example, the Te Aroha Museum, and our tamariki will benefit from being able to get up close and personal with some of those objects. So that really sums up for me today, but just before I finish, I just want to show you the condition of some of the objects that we have marked actually for destruction. This here is a Victorian skirt. It could never go on display. It's in a really, really bad condition. It's very fragile. You'll see some of the ripping in the holes there. There's just simply nothing that we can do without considerable expense to preserve this object any further. Another object is this partial map of the North Island. I'm going to use a really technical term. It's munted. There's not a lot that we can actually do with some of these objects to preserve them, and we do have duplicates elsewhere in the collection. So just to give you a bit of rationale behind why destruction has been, or recycling has been identified for some of those objects. But kua mutu toku kōrero I tēnei wānu reira, tēnā koutou, tēnā tātou katoa, and I'm happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Kia ora. Thank you very much, Lizzie. Councillor Maxwell.
Thank you very much, Lizzie and Kat. Tēnā kōrua. Yes, send that spider back to Prime Minister Morrison over there on an aeroplane. He's sending people back home. He's sending spiders. Oh, sorry. Send them on the first flight. No, a thorough report on the things we got down there, and reading the report, as long as it's done with care and it returns to the family, especially if they're asking for it.
Absolutely.
And if it gives up more room and everything. And I looked through the schedule here. I was looking for Te Tanakai's flute, so I could put a bid in for it.
Well, if it ever goes missing, Uncle, we'll know where to look.
Yeah. But no, I think a thorough report, Madam Chair, and I support the policy that what you are wanting to achieve through this. So, tēnā kōrua.
Ngā mihi nui.
Mr. Waru.
Koe te te amara. Kat. Ngā tirangi waho, noti te ronga, tirangi waho, tēnā koe. E koe hoki e rete, te uri o taro haumi. Tēnā koe, tēnei te uri o taikata, te taina tuakana rau. So, tēnā kōrua. Te ngā kaimanaki o ngā taonga nei. So, yeah. Had to have a laugh again. Munted and shout-outs going on around here. So, karawe, ko tino, te rere ke haere ni te reo. But, no, totally support the kaupapa, te whakahoki ngā taonga ki ngā whānau. Especially me mea te hiherata. I was actually looking at that Tchaikovsky's piano solo. You might want to keep that one. That might be a rare thing. But hoi anō. What my question is around is, so is it just a give back, or is there, he karakia, he hara nei, ki te tuku, nei momo whaonga, I didn't even know those were medical instruments, jingas, but, is there a kind of a tikanga around just, kia taua I ngā wairua. That's all.
Thank you for that question, a really important one. I mean, obviously, with any of our taonga, we respect their mauri, and we do our utmost to care for their spiritual well-being as well as their physical well-being. I might pass over to Kat to answer that question directly, but I'm sure that we would look to do something like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Kia ora koutou. Thanks for the question. Absolutely. It's always a negotiation with the whānau. So it's a matter of seeing where each individual or each whānau is at and just determining how that's going to play out. So we don't have a template as such. It's really having a kōrero with them and seeing what fits best for that situation.
And I just wanted to add, in this presentation, in this proposal, we have no taonga Māori, so it's a largely social history proposal that we are de-accessioning. Obviously, if we were talking about taonga Māori, I think it would generally be within the context of repatriation, where we'd had a request from iwi o hapu, but if in any other context, there would be appropriate tikanga would absolutely be followed with the guidance of our pukinga koeki o te whare taonga o te aroa.
Kia ora, he whātai, nā te mea ki au, he taonga tonu te taonga, and they might have been next door neighbours to our taonga, i roto I te whare pupuri taonga, so, koina noho, kia ora, kia tātonu.
Kia ora. Your Worship, followed by Councillor Yates.
Yes, thank you, and great to hear that we're getting into this, but it's always sensitive, as Stuart and I know, having dealt with some families in the past, and often asked, actually, through my office to assist with perhaps art, deaccessioning that families want that may not be relevant to the Rotorua collection. Is there policy underlying the deaccessioning process?
Yes, there is. So we have a deaccessions policy, which sets out the criteria that under which we can deaccession or we would look to deaccession. It does also say, I think the first line of the policy is that there's a strong presumption that objects will remain in the collection. So it's when we're looking at things that are very much out of scope or fall into those other criteria around very, very poor condition or duplication that we get into deaccessioning. Yeah. But I mean, it is a kaupapa that museums historically have always, done. It is a very normal procedure, but I think it is becoming more and more topical in our sector, because we are looking at, for example, taonga that are in museums far, far away from their papakainga. So I would expect that we will continue to have these kōrero, and there may be some that are more difficult, shall we say, than some of the objects that we have raised today. But yeah, that we are guided by policy.
And I would be very concerned if this was ever seen, as I'm aware of some other museums, saw it as a revenue-raising opportunity.
Absolutely, and it's not
put art onto the art market to raise money for exhibitions. So I want to ensure that that's not a revenue-making opportunity.
Absolutely, Your Worship. That's certainly not what we're looking at here.
I withdraw my comment about the sheet music. Kia ora.
Councillor Yates.
Tēnā koutou o tira, through you, Madam Chair, kei te hihio te mōtini I tēnei o ngā tono, that the proposal to deaccession objects from the collection of Rotorua Museum Te Whare Taonga o Rotara be approved. Ahea no me mihi ka tika kia korua tahi o tira ki tā koutou nā kapa ohu hei hāpai I tēnei o ngā kaupapa hoki o tira ko Te Whare Taonga o Te Aroa. I know that it's not an easy job right now for you to be down at the site down Tallyho Street, as well as working out of the Akamodi as well. So you're definitely scattered, but to have an opportunity to look at what deaccessioning means, even for a council and community, is hugely important. I look forward to the opportunity of repatriation. So all the very best with this.
Ngā mihi nui.
And seconded by, so that was moved by Councillor Yates, seconded by Mr. Waru. Were there any other questions or comments? There appear to be none. Well, thank you very much. Really appreciate the work that's actually gone in behind the scenes with our collection, and want to acknowledge you, Kat, as collections lead, for the work that you've done over the years. And I know certainly since the museum's been closed, it hasn't been easy to look after our collections, but we've always been reassured by you, by all of you. I want to acknowledge you too, Stuart, that our taonga are being looked after in all the ways that they need to be. So thank you very much. And once again, a very warm welcome to you, and congratulations on your new role as Director of our Whare Taonga o Te Aroa.
Ngā mihi nui.
So we've received the report, and we will have... Oh, yeah. So we've got moved by Councillor Yates, seconded by Mr. Waru. All those in favour, please say aye. Aye. Carried. Against? Thank you very much. So we now move into our public excluded session. I would like to advise that there is one item for consideration in public excluded. that is our housing strategy update. The reasons for going into confidential is to enable commercial or industrial negotiations. Can I have a mover and a seconder that the council move into public excluded? Moved by Councillor Donaldson, seconded by Ms Bray. All those in favour, please say aye. Thank you. We'll just have a few minutes while we move into confidential.